Everyone. Notice of the time and place of these committee meetings was publicized by notifying the area news media, by publicizing same in the Omaha World Herald, Oppd Outlets newsletter, Oppd.com, and social media, by displaying such notice on the arcade level of Energy Plaza, and by emailing such notice to each of the district's directors on December 15th, 2023. Thank you all for joining us remotely via WebEx events. As a reminder to board members, executive leadership team, and Oppd staff, please mute your microphones and cell phones to reduce background noise. To members of the public, thank you for attending. You are in listen-only mode. If you have any technology questions, please use the chat feature to WebEx to communicate with the event host. Our agenda for today's meeting is as follows. We will conduct a closed session this morning to discuss two topics, near-term generation update and enterprise risk management quarterly update. We will conclude this morning's closed session no later than 9:50 a.m. in order to open the WebEx meeting to allow the public and Oppd staff to join. We will begin public session at approximately 10 o'clock a.m. and receive reports from each committee. Dr. Moody, do we have a motion to go into closed session?
We sure do. I move that the board go into closed session at this time, 8:01 a.m. to discuss two topics. First, near-term generation update, and the second, enterprise risk management quarterly update. With respect to the near-term generation update, a closed session is necessary for the protection of the public interest because the discussion involves sensitive utility infrastructure information, confidential cost information, and potential resource acquisition strategies, disclosure of which would disadvantage the district in future negotiations with potential contractors. With respect to the enterprise risk management quarterly update, a closed session is necessary for the protection of the public interest because the discussion involves matters that are confidential and protected by the attorney-client privilege and attorney work product doctrine and involve the discussion of security for district property and utility infrastructure information. By the second.
Roll call.
Director Wagner? Yes. Director Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Director Ford? Director Howard? Yes. Director Omaha? Yes. Director Moody?
Yes.
Director Spurgeon?
Yes.
Director Williams?
Yes. The motion to go into closed session has passed. The closed session will be limited to discussion regarding two topics, near-term generation update and enterprise risk management quarterly update. No votes or other actions will be taken.
If you're not scheduled to be involved in the closed session, please exit WebEx at this time.
Motion and a second is required to reconvene in open session.
So moved. Director Wagner? Yes. Director Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Director Ford?
Yes.
Director Howard? Yes. Director Omaha? Yes. Director Moody?
Yes.
Director Spurgeon?
Yes.
Director
Yes. The motion to come out of closed session at 10:13 a.m. is carried. This closed session was limited to discussion regarding two topics, near-term generation update and enterprise risk management quarterly update. Notice the time and place of these committee meetings was publicized by notifying the area news media, by publicizing same in the Omaha World Herald, Oppd Outlets newsletter, Oppd.com, and social media, by displaying such notice on the arcade level of Energy Plaza, and by emailing such notice to each of the district's directors on December 15th, 2023. Thank you all for joining us remotely via WebEx events. As a reminder to board members, executive leadership team, and Oppd staff, please mute your microphones and your cell phones to reduce background noise. To members of the public, thank you for attending. You are in listen-only mode. If you have any technology questions, please use the chat feature in WebEx to communicate with the event host. Per the board's guidelines for public participation, we do not take public comment during the all-committee meeting. We will take public comment at the board meeting on Thursday, December 21st, which will be conducted in person at the Omaha Douglas Civic Center and will begin at 5 o'clock p.m. The public may attend in person or remotely via WebEx events by going to oppd.com. Joining me today in person are my fellow board members, Amanda Wagner, Mike Kavanaugh, Matt Core, Sarah Howard, Janice Mulhoff, Craig Moody, and Mary Spurgeon. We also have members of our executive leadership team, our general counsel, Steve Bruckner, with the Fraser Stryker Law Firm, and Oppd staff. Additionally, we currently have 27 attendees in the meeting online, consisting of Oppd employees and members of the public. Today, we will hear the following committee reports. The Governance Committee report from Director Wagner, the Finance Committee report from Director Spurgeon, the Customer and Public Engagement report from Director Howard, and the Systems Management and Nuclear Oversight Committee report from Director Moody. Javier Fernandez will now give the safety briefing.
I'm going to ask, as usual, Josh Clark to begin the safety briefing here for those of us in person here at the huddle space in Urban Village. Josh.
As we will, you typically will start with a quick safety briefing. So for everybody in the room, as well as even at home, please make sure that you're feeling okay. If you're not, we want you to stay home, make sure you're getting that rest, hydration, and then visiting those doctors as needed. As always in the building here, there are AEDs and first aid equipment directly outside of the doors. There's also fire suppression materials. If anybody does need any assistance during the meeting itself, please feel free to let the OPPD members know. And there's also security representatives right out the door there. Also, I will also be in the building too, so any assistance I can provide, we're happy to do so. In the event of any type of evacuations, we would move to the emergency exits. If there was any severe weather, we'd move to the stairwells, and that's where we would take shelter. Luckily, I believe it's going to be beautiful outside, maybe a little windy. But do keep environmental hazards in mind. Any trips or falls that will get you into the hospital pretty quickly. So watch out for anything like that. And it doesn't seem like it, but we are in the winter months. So if it does start snowing or getting icy, please be aware of that as well. Slips and falls, again, very dangerous. And then finally, in any event of an active threat of any kind, please remember run, hide, fight. We always preface that for any types of business settings or social settings. And then one other thing that I'll mention is cybersecurity. We take that very seriously here at OPPD. We work in some very important and very relegated digital environments. So please be aware of those things and watch out for those phishing or spam types of emails and phone calls. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the group. Have a great meeting.
Thank you, Josh. And I will mention here on the psychological safety, I would like to focus our attention on the multiple perspectives, especially what's, we just had a closed session talking about the very complex nature of our generation portfolio, but also with what's happening around the world. I get questions from employees, hey, what stands are we taking with different conflicts around the world? And my responses, and well, there are multiple perspectives on many fronts. It's really hard to comprehend what's happening around us. I think going back to psychological safety, acknowledging that there are many different perspectives that we have no idea of what the other side of the table has to offer. I think it's a really good opportunity for us to come open to learn about those other perspectives. What are other people experiencing? What information do I not have that I should consider? I often joke, well, half joke, that my wife reminds me that what's obvious to me, it's only obvious to me. And so I think that's a good reminder of that multiple perspective piece that contributes to that psychological safety to know, hey, I definitely have an opinion on a lot of topics, but it's just my opinion, and I probably don't know half of what the other side usually has to offer. So that's a good reminder of keeping that perspective as we talk about psychological safety. And the next slide, please. I'm going to talk about this on Thursday. Focus for December, situational awareness. Again, really important. Taking time to assess the environment that we're stepping into as we're starting projects is incredibly important. As the holidays kick in, our minds are usually not focused on projects and hazards. This is a reminder that we get from Kevin McCormick, especially at the end of December. Focus. That situational awareness becomes even more important as we became distracted with holidays, things like that. Avoiding strains and tears. This has been the topic for the year. It's soft tissue injury, not warming up enough, not assessing your ergonomic situation before you start any job. In my case, setting up the Christmas tree and the lights. Those things could really hurt your back if you're not doing these in the right way. I find that as I get older, it gets harder and harder to not get injured. And then lastly, on the winter weather hazards, winter weather can cause issues at work, especially with the weather that we've been having in Omaha and eastern Nebraska, where it's unusually warm, but it gets really cold at night, and we have freezing, the thaw freeze issue that we typically see in the spring. We're seeing a lot of that here in December. So it's easy to get distracted and complacent and not acknowledge that there's ice on the road in the morning when the rest of the day is in the mid-40s. So that's important for us to remind our employees and ourselves. That concludes my safety brief.
Great, thanks very much. The first committee is the governance committee. And we'll pass that to Dr. Bogner.
All right, thank you. The governance committee met on December 14th and we had a pretty sizable agenda here. We'll certainly talk about SD8 today, but during our pre-committee meeting, we also talked about CEO performance evaluation process. We're making some changes to that process that will be next year. I've sent non-committee members an email kind of outlining some of those things, and you have information available to you in Diligent. I welcome feedback and questions on that process, and then we're hoping to implement that in January. We also talked about the 2024 board planning agenda, looking at board officer elections and committee assignments. Our intention is to do officer elections and committee assignments in January. So I will be following up with each of you on getting your thoughts on that. And then let's see, we also, one of the action items out of our board workshop earlier this year was to identify a process and approach for looking at our governance practice, our GPs, and our board staff linkage policies, our ELs. And so we are still solidifying what that approach will look like going forward. So more to come on that topic. We also had a look ahead at the governance committee planning calendar, which is looking a little light for governance the next couple months, but it will certainly ramp up as we get into the mid-year. And with that, let's see, what's next? What's the next slide? Agenda planning calendar. So then this, Scott, did you want to? Oh,
You're lucky.
you moved on me. You want to take this one?
Yeah, just real high level and very quick. This is really a compliance item. A deal for GP4 rather, the agenda planning indicates that the board will have this planning calendar available. We're pleased to announce as we look forward to 2024 that it is out there, and the past practice will be updating that agenda every month. But you can look at the year in advance should you like to.
Thank you. All right, and with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Purnell to walk us through SD8.
Morning, everyone.
Morning. Morning. There you go.
To get to 25. Excellent. We've been hearing this morning a lot about the diversity of the portfolio. Javier spoke about differences of opinions and things of that nature. And relative to all of that, none of this work can be done unless we have employees who are both engaged to do the work. But more importantly, I think our core values come to the forefront as we often talk about having a passion to serve, honoring our community, and caring about each other, and we do just that. So with that, I am here today to present the monitoring report for SD8. SD8 is, for all intents and purposes, broken into 3 sections. I say the first one is all about diversity and inclusion. What are we doing in that space? You, the board, you have mandated, required of us that we maintain a diverse and inclusive workplace. Secondly, it's about employee engagement. What does that mean? The employee engagement really speaks to how our employees are connecting with the organization. So what that might look like or how it shows up is that employees who are engaged, they are more likely to step up and do more than might be required of them. So we cannot write everything that we ask our employees to do in a job description. Employee engagement is very important in bringing that to the forefront. And then finally, there are some things that I consider more compliance related in nature, and that speaks to the third part of SD8. So that's talking about engaging our workforce somewhat in personal and professional development, but more importantly, down closer to the bottom, we're looking at the collective bargaining agreements. Do we have written processes, procedures as needed and necessary, as well as the affirmative action plan, which I addressed some questions with the committee last week, but you will have an opportunity as well to talk about that. Today, though, for all intents and purposes, I will focus on the first two areas, and of course, I plan to leave some time at the end in case you have questions I'd like to address. Next, please. So first, as it relates to diversity and inclusion, that will be covered in this section. This slide shows our demographics by ethnicity. So not only are you looking at the demographics or the breakdown of our employee base by ethnicity, but you're also seeing what that looks like in our service territory as well as in the state at large. Now, we look at that and we use it as a benchmark. Ideally, we would like to look like or mirror somewhat our service territory. That is not always the case. However, what is more important here and what I'd like to highlight is why this is important. So as we have other ethnic groups, as an example, the next slide after this one shows gender. As we have those groups represented within our community, it's important that there is a voice internally that can represent or speak to what is happening within those communities. So that is the importance of this bit of information. Next slide, please. As it relates to gender, OPPD is predominantly male. We know that. When I arrived here almost 6 years ago, we were 80% male, 20% female. Our female population has moved up. It is ticking up a little bit. We are now at 22%. And at the bottom of this page, it's showing really some of the considerations as to why these demographics may be what they are. When we consider, again, what the population looks like in our service territory as well as in the state, we are seeing something closer to 50-50. However, we know based on the work that we do within our organization, as well as the fact that a lot of what we do, or a considerable part of what we do, is STEM related. We are having some challenges societally, not only here within the Nebraska area, but nationally as well, and I dare say sometimes globally, related to getting women into the STEM field. So this representation is very indicative of what's happening in industry. So once again, this is not particular to OPPD. Within our industry, within the energy industry, this is very common and this is what we're seeing. What I'm going to use the word proud. I'm pleased that as it relates to management, the numbers are starting to look even a little bit better. So as it relates to our female population within the management ranks, that is at the manager level and above, we are now at about 24%. Next, please. To sort of wrap up our conversation or discussion on inclusion and diversity, we have a Bridge Builders program. This is one of several things that we do to encourage and promote diversity and inclusion throughout the organization. This is one cohort of employees who've been taken through a program that is offered by Inclusive Communities to help us get all the things, get the information and knowledge that we need, and determine how, in fact, we can promote those behaviors, diversity and inclusion behaviors within OPPD. So we have several cohorts that are going through that. We have employees who are doing this work here on campus. Some of them go to another facility, but I'm very proud as well of the work that's happening there. Next slide, please. Okay, as it relates to employee engagement, we have been asked to perform an annual engagement survey each year. And this is what's happening. So as you can see, our response rate, relatively speaking, is very high. 80% plus is off the charts as it relates to folks participating in surveys. So we look at this and we see, oh, well, we had a little dip. Generally, folks, as it relates to engagement surveys, we usually don't have even up to 50% of employees who participate in surveys. So the fact that we generally have as many employees participating in the survey as we do definitely speaks to the fact that our employees are interested in speaking to us. We definitely ask them to do so, and we encourage participation. As it relates to favorability, which is shown on, for you, it'll be the right side of this page. We saw a significant increase this year, going closer to 76%. The highest, of course, as you can see, engagement score that we have had. Within the governance committee meeting last week, we spoke to what represented the dip that we see here, and it's rising. So I think Javier spoke first about this idea around the ELT being new and the work that we were doing. So over the last 2 years, we really have been doing a significant body of work that has been a little different, wouldn't you say, Brad? Based on what our employees are used to doing. So our team was getting in place. So we had a relatively new leadership team that was still forming itself. And this year, we definitely spent a whole lot of time explaining to leaders how they could engage with this work. Now, as it relates to what you're seeing here, I will tell you, there was also a significant division of sorts between the way our leaders were getting or capturing what we were saying relative to PF 2050 and all the other significant work that's going on. So our leaders were showing up as more engaged than their staff, than the individual contributors. And I would say we somewhat expected it, or we should have, because we, again, were investing a whole lot more time in that space. So coming up in this year, our focus is going to be on helping our leaders translate a lot of what is going on, what you have been talking about. How do we translate that for our employees and communicate to them, this is how your work is directly connected to what is going on with the organization. So that is what's going to be the important work for us to do within 2024 and beyond.
Mikel, on the favorability,
Yes.
over the last 4 years, it's almost pretty much within the margin of error, isn't it?
Relatively
I
speaking,
mean, more so than an extreme change, I guess.
that is true. That is correct, if you think about it that way. Now, having said all of that, at the bottom of the slides, what you'll see here is we still did not achieve top quartile as well as we did. And what that means is the companies that are similarly sized, they are, from an engagement perspective, they are moving up as well. So what my team has done, we have been looking at who are these folks in our in the realm of who we are being compared to, so to speak. Aaron, would you go to the next slide, please, which has some important information. And if you look at this, OPPD in 2023, you see what that bar looks like. That represents our employees who are highly, moderately, barely, and somewhat disengaged. And if you compare that line to what is below the thick black line that represents utilities, if we were comparing ourselves to utilities, we are doing significantly better than most utilities. At the bottom, though, the last two, we see same size companies that are same sized, and then same size that are top quartile. So again, when we compare ourselves to utilities, we are doing significantly, what we would call significantly better. When we look at same size companies, we are very close, moderately the same. But when we look at the companies that hit top quartile, we see what they are doing. And that represents a little bit of the difference that you're seeing and why OPPD would have missed top quartile this year. But we're going to continue to do the work that we do. We are very pleased, though, with the progress that we're making. And I feel like we are going to continue to see some improvements in these areas. Next slide, please. So the way that we engage our employees at OPPD, or at least one of several ways that we engage our employees at OPPD, is through the communities of practice and the ERGs, that is the employee resource groups. And what these groups do, they create communities within our larger community. So think of it as a subdivision that might exist within your county. And that is what these are. So these are the communities of practice that are represented here. And these communities sort of galvanize or get their energy or strength, pun intended, through the work that they're doing. So whether it is around data and analytics or project management, or we have the Society of Engineers, et cetera, that is the group, those are the groups that get together. And again, those employees then feel like they're a part of a community. So in some cases, it's related to the work that they do or skills that they're interested in. And in other cases, they're looking at something else that is of commonality to them. Next slide for me, please, Erin. So for the ERGs, you've seen these before. These groups are up and functioning. Wanted to point out that 45% of our workforce participates either in an ERG or a COP. What you will see up there, the item or the logo that's circled, is a new group that we'll be launching that will be focused on, I say, diverse abilities. It's a group really for folks with disabilities. They're interested in launching that. So that will be coming to us in 2024. Next slide, please. We have lots of opportunity for development. As a matter of fact, among some of the highest scores that we received also in the engagement survey was really around we are being recognized. Recognition saw a 20% increase in favorability year over year over the last year. Truly, the university is one of the many development opportunities we have for our employees. You see two of the cohorts that are here. We've had almost 120 employees go through that program thus far. And what that means is when we are in need of crew leaders, in particular in the field, you can see these guys are out there in the trenches doing the work. Whenever we are in need of crew leaders, we have folks who are ready to jump in. So we then just pull them out based on seniority. They are able to fill those roles immediately. Outside of that, our learning management system, we have more than 10,000 pieces of learning for our employees. So again, our employees themselves have recognized that this is not something that OPPD has any shortage of. So within our organization, that is, if they want to get learnings that are on demand, they can do that. But we, of course, also offer live sessions as well, where they're able to come and get other development opportunities. That is what I prepared to discuss with you today. Your deck has something like 44 pages in it. There's lots of information, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to ask questions. I would be more than happy to answer those. And that way I can focus on the areas that you are most interested in.
Thank you. So the governance committee reviewed this and we are recommending that the board finds OPPD and is taking reasonable and appropriate measures to comply with the board policy. So we'll take questions and comments.
Greg. Sorry, much of it.
No, go ahead.
We talked about a couple different types of measurements for employees in the organization by gender and by race. Do we keep track of the percentage of employees who are represented by unions across the organization? Is that a number that we have available?
Oh, yes, our union population makes up, right now, it's about 65% of the population. Used to be 2/3. It's in that space, about 2/3.
Great. And as we talked in recent months about significant growth across the organization, adding headcount, is that something we're tracking, percentage of employees? Is there a change in that overall? Are we adding mostly represented employees or not? I guess, is that something that we are tracking moving forward as the way that we are measuring the development of our workforce broadly?
Yes, to Director Kavanaugh's point, we are seeing very small shifts in those numbers. I would say it's in some type of the degree of error in terms of the movement we've seen has not been more than 3% at any one time in either direction.
Great. Yeah, glad to hear that. Is that something we could include as a numeric part of the report in the future, just so we can keep an eye on it moving forward? I just am interested in that as another type of way that we are keeping track of details about our employee relations across the organization.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
If I may, I have a curiosity about the number of new positions that we have that are union. Is it possible to get that information?
I can't say today that there are new positions, but we are always filling those positions. If that is something, again, that you're interested in, I definitely would want to learn or find out more about that, but that information would be available as well.
We did add headcount,
Mhm.
2023. We've got headcount from 2024. Frontline folks, so there is growth in that area. So we should be able to highlight those changes.
So there's growth. When you talk about new positions, are you talking about something that's different, a different role versus additional headcount?
No, I think when we're looking at near-term generation and we're adding new positions as part of this growth, how many of those new positions are union?
Understood. Thank you.
Sorry, I would be interested in the difference though.
Yeah.
If it is you're saying if it's a created position that wasn't there before versus bringing someone in there for something that's already there.
Yes.
If you're going to the trouble, I'd like to know about both, please. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Whether we have new positions as well as the increase in headcount in existing positions.
Yeah.
That would just depend on where the jobs are, right? As far
Correct.
as whether they're currently part of the bargaining unit or considered exempt.
That is correct.
Yeah, that's.
Are there ever any, is it ever debatable, I guess, as far as whether it would fall under the exempt or not exempt? Couldn't imagine it would, I guess.
Generally not. We are usually very clear, and the unions are very good at identifying the roles that would be covered or come under their jurisdiction. Now, having said all of that, I want you to know as well that we are not going to fill every position that we need with a FTE, with a full-time employee. So we are, and you've heard from Danny Belt and even Troy previously, that we are out looking for strategic partners. So we have strategic partners who come in. So as an example, and I mean, the most obvious one is going to be the folks who trim our trees or keep trees in reasonable condition around our service territory. If those folks were in the organization, they would likely be union represented employees. They are not. They are not in our organization. And so there is nothing that says that we don't have those services available. But we do go through an analysis as to whether or not it makes sense to bring someone in or bring a function in and have FTEs do it. Sometimes we just need companies we need to augment skills, or they have technology or equipment that would be onerous for us to purchase. And as a result of that, we opt to go with the strategic partner. But again, we have that information available. I just want you also to be mindful that there are lots of considerations that must be taken into account when we determine whether or not we're going to increase headcount. Yes.
Would you talk, there's a lot of slides. Would you talk a little bit about, oh, well, first of all, how, well, couple of questions. How broadly do you advertise for open positions? That would be one. And then how do you do local recruitment, especially young people, and you're in our service territory?
Yes. It depends on the role. So I would say for open positions in technology, for example, we usually throw that out very, very broadly. We post on LinkedIn and several other hiring sites specifically for that reason. So we usually get applicants from, at least in our region, sometimes from across the country. As it relates to how we are engaging the local talent, we are definitely on most of the campuses. So we're on UNO, UNL, UNK's campus. We have connections. Again, these partnerships that we're talking about with the two-year colleges that are in the area. Kevin and his team, of course, work intimately with the folks at Metro and Northeast Community College. That's about 2 hours away, in terms of how do we get that type of population here. So we work with them. Sometimes we get it through what we would consider to be, again, a strategic partnership in hiring in that way. But again, we're on lots of the campuses. And we have alumni from other companies who also recruit their friends to come here. In answering a question earlier, you know, I think it was shared with some of you maybe how many employees we actually have who have returned to OPPD over the last 5 years. So every year we're seeing on average somewhere between 20 and 22 employees who are returning here, who were at OPPD before, left, and are now returning to us.
Each year?
Each year over the last 5 years is what we looked at recently.
Yeah, and that was one of my questions in the committee meeting, was about, you know, in the exit interviews, what are we hearing, and what if at some point we could have some kind of an idea about why folks are leaving the utility or leaving the organization. And maybe it doesn't need to be included in this, but I think that's really important, that we understand why people would leave. And then, I mean, it's awesome that there's some, you know, some of them are bouncing right back, but yeah, it would be, I think it's important to recognize reasons why folks are leaving the organization.
If there's a common reason.
Yeah, and to see if there's some common reason.
And we look that up based on that question. Although I will say we keep track of those all the time. Again, given that sometimes this is recognition, acknowledgement on our part that all employees may not freely tell us because they may want to come back. They may not always share the real reason for that. So we are going to get a third-party vendor, actually the same company that helps us with the engagement survey, Quantum. We will be issuing the exit surveys that way with the hope that the anonymous nature of the responses will give us better data. And that's not to say the data we have isn't nice now, but it's lovely, but we would definitely want to know, is there something else, other mitigating factors that speak to that?
But Kel, do you have any figures on percentage of the of our turnover each year short of retirement age? Folks being short of retirement age, what turnover should we have? Think we have
Between 3 and 4%.
Pardon me?
Between 3 and 4%. About 3.1.
What's typical for an organization this size?
Yeah, something.
Much higher.
Much higher.
Yeah.
Our turnover rate is not very high.
Well, I appreciate that number. Thank you. And that seems in line with the other things, the high response rate on the engagement survey and the overall percentage of favorability. And last years have been extremely difficult, not let alone the public and public health conditions, but the growth that we are experiencing and increase in headcount that we've talked about recently. So I'm glad to see a positive report, knowing that people who have left often decide that they would like to come back to OPPD. Not many are deciding to leave. Those who are here are happy, and that we're preparing for the future. So overall, I appreciate the information and the way that we've documented the way that the happiness of our employees with being a part of a team that is doing important work in our community. So appreciate all of that. I think this report does a good job of capturing kind of the goals that we are looking to achieve and providing information about, yes, OPPD is a good place to work. People like being here and we're making our community better. So I appreciate everything that's presented here, and I'm glad to hear that we've had such strong success in our employee relations in the last year. So thanks very much for the report overall.
Excellent. And thank you to those of you who made the state of the utility. If you watched that video, you would have seen a whole lot of work going on relative to our ability to both support the community as well as what's happening internally from a work perspective, critical projects that are being completed as well as otherwise. Yes, sir, Mr. Moon.
Karen, could you go back one more? So, yes. And we're also reasonable and appropriate measures to comply. So I'd love to hear the governance committee. What's the rationale for why we chose that versus the
Sufficiently compliant. So since we are falling short of the quarter,
key metric?
the key metric,
Yeah, okay.
that we felt that this was a better representation about where we are.
Okay.
Acknowledgement that there's really good work happening and they've closed a big gap.
Yeah.
We still have work to do in this space.
And that's the key metric there, is that we're at the 75.9% favorable.
The top quartile.
What's
is
the delta
metric.
between where we are and where the top quartile starts?
That's about 2.5%, a little under 3.
We're right under it.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That was the driver there.
Thank you.
For on that chart that with the response rate, did not achieve top quartile performance and employee engagement for similar sized companies. You're speaking just to the response rate, right?
No.
No, okay. I understood that as the response rate. Okay, thank you. Cause I shared the same. I think everybody's doing great, and something from the State of the Union also was how many applications
Yes.
OPPD gets, right, is
Yes.
a pretty good demonstration of.
Some positions we literally get thousands of.
I think it's important to highlight that the board has found OPPD in compliance, sufficiently compliance in the past. We've never been top quartile. So we're still not top quartile. This is a little bit of a change, and I appreciate the challenge to say, hey, despite the fact that we had the best year, the highest favorability score, the bar is moving higher. Other companies are also improving. So I appreciate this. Say, hey, we're doing good stuff. We're pleased, not satisfied.
Yep, okay.
And I think it's consistent with what we've talked about at the last two board workshops about how we're going to change that recommendation language. So no punitive effect.
Got it.
but-
Yep. Just want to make sure. Yep. I'm all good.
Well, we had an opportunity for other reflections. I just want to commend you for your offerings for personal development, self-care. Gosh, I'm looking at 10 here at least. And then the internal training that you offer to people who say, think to themselves, am I doing a good enough job? What could I do better? Oh, here's some training to help me out in lots of different ways. I just think that's really smart. Excellent. This was really a very great report. And I commend you and your team for all you're doing.
Thank you, Director Spurgeon.
All
I
right.
mean, 60 seconds or even less than that. Connection between these and Power in the Future 2050, as you will recall, there are 3 elements that are internal to the organization. One of them is purpose-driven culture. So what you heard today from Michael very much ties to that, and we have a few milestones that we identified in the Power of the Future 2050 vision A lot of them have to do with developing opportunities, employee development, having our Empowered University up and running, our learning center up and running, and loading a lot more courses and allowing opportunities for employees to develop, to have a reskilling, upskilling. We're well on our way to do that. In fact, today we already have a lot of those functions today in 2023, where we thought we were going to have them in 2025. So we're making significant progress. But as I mentioned earlier, we're not satisfied. There's still a gap for us to really get to that best places to work, top quartile, which will tell me we do have a purpose-driven culture. We don't lack the purpose, but it's that connection between the work that people do day in and day out to having that higher purpose. And it's not just a job; it's a very, very important mission. So I'm thrilled. I'm making that connection to the Partner Future 2050 vision that we have.
So while we're on this slide, I'll just offer up, you've already shared your additional reflections. Are there other reflections people would like to share?
I'm glad to hear about the discussion that Director Moody mentioned and that Javier echoed about the change in the way that we are reviewing this report based on the metric, and that we understand what this implies, and that the bar is getting higher. And so I agree that that's a good direction moving forward. So I think that that understanding helps us to figure out where we're going with the strategic directive. I don't think that implies any real explicit language changes, but just an understanding that we have, with similar results, had a sufficiently compliant recommendation. And this year it is a different recommendation. I think as long as we're all on the same page about what that means and what we are expecting in the future, I think that's very helpful from us to you, correct? That's what I heard you saying. And I just want to make sure that we're on the same page about what the expectations are. Yep.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add as a reflection, I feel like we spend a lot of time talking about poles and wires and assets and physical things, but those things don't work unless we have the people to procure them, to design them, to create them, to run them. So I'm really pleased with the progress. Right? And I know that, like, when the data first came out, I know that the ELT team was really thrilled about it, because there a lot of work goes into managing our people and helping to develop our people. So yeah, good work. This is great.
All right, with that, the governance committee rests.
Great, thanks very much. Next committee on the agenda is the Finance Committee. Director Spurgeon.
Thank you, Chair Williams. Now, we met as a subcommittee here on December 8th, and following a safety briefing, we had a little update on the Public Utilities Regulatory Policies Act, which we're going to hear about later today in detail. Information on some new work that needs to be done at the North Omaha station. Then spend some time reviewing the final corporate operating plan and comments received about that from the public, which again is on our agenda today. And then we're updated about the declaration of anticipated 2024 capital expenditures reimbursement, and that also is on our agenda. So we had a quick look at the board work plan for the year as required. We're going to be filling in lots of spaces in that under the Finance Committee as we move again. But that was our meeting. So I'll turn to Mr. Bishop for the other items.
Director Spurgeon, this will be our final touch point for the 2024 COP. In terms of the request, we'll have that to the board on Thursday, hopefully advancing forward with approving the COP. Today's intent is to really go back over the high points of what was covered in the past regarding the COP. There's been no adjustments since we last presented this last month. That's always an item that we want to bring back in terms of if there have been any new items we need to adjust for. That's not been the case. I think it's important as we talk about it to also walk through the process that's been followed. Last month, we had the full presentation to the board, if you'll remember. Mention that as just point of reference for the public. We had the full presentation of the COP, had a robust Q&A with the board, received a lot of different questions about the various assumptions and elements of the COP, and addressed those in that session. We also have a lot of documentation out there. So when you look back, and there's over 200+ pages of materials that have been out there for review. We've got the 2024 COP book that walks through all the key details and assumptions. We've referenced that a number of different times in the various conversations we have. If you have questions about what's composing the COP, that's contained within the COP book. You got the COP memo, which again summarizes the requests. Also letters from Brattle. They do our independent review. I'll talk about that here in a moment in terms of our cost of service and an overall reasonableness of our COP. And then we have the detailed service regulations as well. So if people want to go back and look and specifically how it's going to impact their rates, we've got that in detail so that they're able to make that assessment. We also had feedback regarding comments provided on the COP, and then we've got the resolution and data sheet. So all covered last month, again, out there for public consumption. Great documents produced by a number of different folks throughout the organization. I would highlight, we've got Tim Linnell, Beth Boyle, and then Dammy back there who have been facilitating a good chunk of this across the entire organization for 9 months. So we just want to thank you for all the work that you put into the process to get us to this point. The other piece I'd highlight is in October for the Finance Committee, we did do a 5-year review. So we've been providing the financial outlook for almost 3 months now, leading us to this point. Go to the next slide. So relative to the request, again, large request, a $2.1 billion budget that we've got laid out. This is broken out by all the expenditure categories. I did want to talk about really 3 themes that came out in our discussion when we went through the robust corporate operating plan last month and how that translates into the request that's in front of the board today. It relates to load growth, reliability, and strategic investments. We've talked quite a bit about our load growth. We continue to see substantial load growth, growing to almost 100 average megawatts of peak demand on an annual basis. We've talked also about how that benefits us as an organization. We've had that over the past couple of years, and we'll continue to see that in the future as it relates to our ability to support the funding for our strategic priorities and increasing the investment in our infrastructure to increase reliability. On topics of reliability, again, we continue to invest in our existing as well as new assets from a grid resiliency perspective. Again, continue to invest in our transmission distribution system, substations. We've talked in detail about specifically those level of investments to improve the level of reliability on the system. Also, as we think about power with a purpose, adding investments in existing and new generation, that continues to be a focus so we can make sure that we're not only meeting our existing and growing load growth, but also adjusting for our planning reserve margins and different regulatory requirements that are impacting the organization. And then relative to strategic investments, again, that's really enabled by our ability to continue to see that load growth and have that paid for. We've talked about our investments in our AMI, two-way communication for our customers, what that means in terms of the benefits that they'll receive, investments in our critical technology backbone, workforce transformation. Mikkel just did a fantastic job walking through the continued investments that would be coming forward underneath those strategic investments. And also our facilities. We know that we've lagged behind for a period of time and are now focused to get our facilities up to where they need to be under our master facilities plan.
For those of you following on Diligent, that's page 263. We moved quite forward and found it.
Thank you. So what does this mean to our customers? We talked about improved service and reliability. There also is a small general rate increase that we're requesting as well, 2.5%. I really want to pass out the accolades to the organization trying to find ways to reduce that in spite of inflationary pressures that have come our way. As we think about it, just as a data point, when we look at other inflationary pressures, general inflation is up 3.7% as of September. We've seen in the energy sector a very steep increase in the level of inflation. Looking back over the past 24 months for the sector itself, it's about 15%. And then EIA data between 2021 and 2022, we see that the average retail rate increase has been about 11.4%. So we're proud that we're able to keep it at 2.5%. We know it impacts everyone, and we don't take that lightly. But we do feel like it's reasonable based upon the requests that we've got and the ask from the organization and the board. Relative to that, we still feel also that we're going to be in a very competitive position. Looking at the EIA data for 2022, we're at 26.5% below the national average. So we feel that we still maintain that competitive position moving forward. Move on to the next slide. Here's a different look at our budget. We incorporated this last year based upon our director's request. We really like how it highlights the investment in dollars. Where are they going? Business are being impacted in terms of current operations and how are we transforming the organization. So as we look at that, the largest drivers associated with our current operations, roughly 75%. Again, when we think about keeping the lights on, focusing on our current operations, 47% of that's in O&M. So between people, cost to run the utility, power costs, O&M, commodity costs, all of those pieces run through that area. We've got other current expenditures, 19%. Again, I call that cost of doing business. Depreciation, decommissioning, debt service, pilot payments, payment taxes. And then we've also got capital support for current assets, 9%. Again, maintaining our current infrastructure, transmission, distribution, generation assets, technology in our facilities. Again, making sure we've got those key elements to keep us reliable. And then lastly, the 25% in terms of transformation, that really hits on our strategic priorities, power with the purpose, AMI, our master facilities plan. And so hopefully that gives a depiction of where the dollars are going, what's associated with maintaining what we've got today, and then how we're advancing the organization forward in the future. Go to the next slide. We covered this last month. This is really what's causing that rate increase. We've got it broken out between the three largest drivers: net power costs, growth in capital portfolio, and operation and maintenance expense. As we think about our power costs, they continue to increase. Cost to serve not only our existing, but also new customers. What we're seeing there is purchase power is continuing to increase as we're increasing our load. And then also we've seen a decrease in our off-system sales as a result of lower than expected congestion hedging revenues that we've experienced historically. Relative to our capital portfolio, we've talked about in detail what composes the $727 million. We walked through the various projects. Again, there's really good support in the COP book that lays out all of the different projects that are falling in there. We've highlighted too our investments in existing assets. That's continued to go up over time. We know that we have an aging fleet and it continues to require more and more dollars. We're also dispatching our units differently than we have in the past. And so again, we continue to assess and make sure that we're investing appropriately to maintain those existing assets. And then a good portion of that's associated with transformation of our and modernizing our electric grid as we continue to improve the service and reliability that people experience from the utility. Operation maintenance costs continue to increase. I think those are fairly self-explanatory. We've experienced that in our personal lives. Inflationary costs, we've seen that across the board. Labor, parts, consulting costs, those all continue to grow and are a driver as well. We can go to the next slide. This really lays out what we covered last month. Again, just highlighting the components of the rate action that's in front of the board. 2.5% is the increase, and that's across all the retail classes. I will highlight a couple of things. We've been fortunate in the fact that some of the extra costs we experienced in 2023 that would have gone through as in fuel and purchase power adjustment. We were able to forgive those costs, and so that's why we see that as a zero relative to the impact for 2024. Otherwise, we would have had to pay for those costs we incurred in 23 and 24. We also walked through in detail the impacts of transitioning some of our costs from the base rate into from the FPPA factor into the base rate as we've continued to evolve our generation system. Move on. Here's how it breaks out by major customer class. So we know the average is 2.5 over on the far left. As we walk through, we walked in detail through what the impacts were for residential, commercial, industrial, lighting, and wholesale. As we talk through that again, the impacts that we're seeing on the average customer bill for residential is roughly 44 cents per month relative to residential. small general service customer about $1.17 a month. And those were different elements that we highlighted as we walked through the specifics. We spent quite a bit of time going through different questions that surfaced on this. I suspect we may have some as we open it up for questions to the board.
Yeah, for possibly Javier can answer this. Has there been any pushback from any of our commercial customers over the increase here, obviously being a little higher than so we didn't? Has there been any kind of comments or?
I can share.
Let me, I'm going to pass it to Tim. In terms of just general feedback from the public, it was very light. I think we had one question that actually came through to the board and we were able to get that addressed very quickly. Tim and his team did a fantastic job to reach out to the customer and specifically proactively engage to see what the customer's feedback was.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for the question, Director Kavanaugh. The feedback overall was very muted and modest from our CNI customers. I will say that where the feedback was more acute was on the high end of the averages, right? So each within a rate class, each customer will be affected a bit differently. So while there are customers within the averages of a rate class impact that are on the low end or the moderate end, there will be a few that are at the higher end of that average range. And those, obviously, those impacts are more acute for those customers. We talk with those customers individually. We work to outline exactly what the impact will be to them. So we try to minimize surprises. And as importantly, we use that as a springboard into conversations about ways they can defray that through energy efficiency opportunities or other programs that maybe they're not participating in.
I'll walk that a little bit further, because we're talking about that as well. After the vote, then emails will be going out to the customers, just letting them know the impact, as well as how do they get a hold of customer service so that they can help lower their bills. So that will be happening during the next several weeks.
To highlight behind the scenes too, so public affairs, customer and rates have been working for months to pull these pieces together so we can proactively get out there and talk to the customers. Really appreciate all the partnership.
I would say of all the years I've been doing this, this probably got the most coverage that I've seen in the last 12, 13 years. So.
On the communication after approval, we're doing broad communication to everyone, or we are using internal information to communicate with people we know might be differently impacted than the rest of the rate class.
Oh, so we'll be doing general as well as specifics.
Great. Glad to hear it. And we do have assistance programs. The customer assistance program pilot is still available. Is that right? If customers were impacted and wanted to look into that program, that's still available. Is that right?
It is, Director Williams. We have a number of programs that either we will facilitate with other partner agencies in the service territory, and the customer assistance program is still open and still has spots for qualifying participants. So always those conversations will spur or potentially spur an opportunity to talk with customers about either assistance programs and or ways they can lower their bill or defray costs.
Great. Glad to hear about that outreach. Thanks very much.
Go to the next slide. So again, we've talked about this in the past, the independent review where we bring in Brattle to do a review of our cost of service as well as a general reasonableness of the COP. Those documents are included in the board package as well. And again, I would highlight that we got a clean bill of health, no preliminary issues that we saw, or no issues that we got regarding the review of the COP. And they did opine that our report and the rates as constructed were fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. So fantastic to have them as part of the process. Again, this isn't just a rubber stamp. They do press on the team, ask a lot of different questions, both as we develop the COP as well as when we do the cost of service and rate design work. For the next slide. Again, we want to make sure that we're following the strategic directive in terms of following the mission to provide affordable, reliable, environmentally sensitive energy services. Again, we do this, the process itself takes 9 months. We work across the entire organization to get an enterprise perspective, ensure that we're meeting the mission statement for the organization. So we're very comfortable and proud to highlight that we're in compliance. With that, we'll open it for questions.
Thank you. I guess broad thoughts. I appreciate all the work that goes into this. And I think we've talked about this in the past. The board has generally been very supportive of making sure that the resources are available for our leadership and the employees to carry out the mission and all the other areas, other strategic directives. I think we've talked about how those two overlap. So glad to see a corporate operating plan that is aligned with those outcomes. And again, I just wanted to make sure that I voice support for the board continuing to provide what's necessary for staff to do the things that we are asking. And this is kind of the annual time when that happens. And so we appreciate you putting that together and making sure to ask for the things that are necessary to continue delivering great results.
Seeing no questions, hearing none, next item.
All right. Next, we've got our declaration of anticipated capital expenditure reimbursement. This has been a long-standing process at OPPD. This is where we pay for the capital projects with cash and then ultimately replenish the cash paid with what we issue in debt. So the ask from the board will be to allow us to approve that as it relates to our future debt offering. You'll note here, again, longstanding process of 1979. We do highlight the amount of expenditures that we expect to outlay relative to our capital program, $727 million. That will tie back to what you just saw within the COP budget. Why do we do this? This is different than a lot of other utilities. Typically, utilities will go out, issue debt, incur interest expense, and then ultimately build their projects, obviously at a cost to the customer. That's one benefit where we reduce the amount of interest expense paid, so benefit to the customer. The other piece is just the time and effort. If you're out issuing tax exempt debt, there's a number of different IRS regulations that surround it, different tests that need to be done. By following this process, we avoid having to do a lot of those tests. So really two strong benefits associated with this effort. I know, John, you're here. Any items you highlight in the years of doing this?
You did a good job summarizing it, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you for facilitating the process. Again, this will be an item we request the board to approve. Any questions?
I think just to highlight that this process, which I've heard you say with your experience in other utilities is rather unique, is one that saves OPPD money and time. So it's great advantage. Yeah, thank you.
Summary. Thank you.
I believe we have one other item under finance. These Regulatory Policies Act.
Yes, hello. This is Robin. Can you all hear me? I'm virtual today.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about not being in person, but the norovirus has hit my household and I figured that was not a Christmas present any of you wanted. So I figured I would do this virtually today. I won't go into great detail on the history. Let's go to the first slide. I feel like we've met a lot over the past 6 weeks on PURPA, but as you remember, under the IIJA, PURPA was updated in 2 respects, and it requires public power entities like OPPD to consider, provide for public comment, and determine whether to adopt two proposed retail service standards relating to demand response and electric vehicle charging stations. So that is what OPPD's requirements to establish compliance with PURPA are. Consider, provide for comment, and make a determination. There's not a PURPA obligation from a compliance perspective to adopt or otherwise act under these revisions. So let's go to the next slide. As we have discussed in the past, OPPD has robust processes in place to consider both DR and EV activities, starting with the DR. Demand response. OPPD has strategic directives that guide its public and board engagement on high priority issues and provides benchmarking of these activities with active board involvement. We've heard about some of those already today. the strategic directive process. So DR activities are discussed and impacted by 4 of these strategic directives as noticed on this slide. They are also considered in OPPD's rate design project, and OPPD currently has 7 different DR and time of use rate schedules, and there's 2 current residential programs in use. OPPD is strategically working to expand demand response through customer incentives, lowering thresholds, targeted marketing, increased advertising of these programs to attract additional customers. And if we could go to the next slide really quick, and then we'll pop back to the recommendation. I just wanted to further highlight OPPD's activities with AMI. This is going to be very helpful in the future for demand response. AMI is going to give OPPD that 2-way communication path between it and its customers. It's going to allow our customers to reduce electric usage during peak periods with the real-time data that they received. So again, we see AMI as something that will complement our customer-owned generation and increase demand response participation throughout our service area. If we could hop back to the previous slide. So based upon the things that we have been considering and discussing and OPPD's processes as we've been talking about them this past 6 weeks to 2 months, OPPD's recommendation is that it should decline to adopt the proposed purpose standards. And I guess when we say we decline to adopt, that is specifically limited to this PURPA compliance measure. OPPD will continue and is committed to continue engaging on the demand response process through its strategic directives, its rate design project, and all its typical board and public activities. So we can skip to 2 slides. Yep, right here. So similarly, on the EV charging side, we have strategic directives that touch upon 3, and also, again, that rate design project. So currently, OPPD has installed 11 chargers, and it has a large number of third-party charging stations, totaling about 110 approximately throughout its service territory. OPPD staff is continuing internal and external resources with EV growth and charging trends throughout studies. It's participating internally and externally with study groups to figure out the right way to continue to deploy this. It has provided successful incentives in the past that we have talked about, and it's exploring new grants and partnerships. OPPD provides customer resources to educate and provide locations for its current charging stations. And then again, you will see the recommendation at the bottom of this slide. Given the various activities and robust process OPPD has through its strategic directives and its rate design project, we would recommend that OPPD decline to adopt the proposed PURPA service language, but again, continue through its robust board and public process to continue to deploy electric vehicles in the right way for OPPD. So I want to stop now for a second on that and see if there's any questions on the 2 specific recommendations here.
Can you briefly comment on public comment that was received in regard to this?
Yes, we can. Let's go to the next slide, please. So as you remember, we have gone through a couple different ways to notify the public of this issue. We've discussed this obviously here today and last month at the all committee meeting. There will be an opportunity for the public to speak at the board meeting on Thursday. And also, as we have discussed in the past, we created a PURPA webpage on the Community Connect website that was open from a little bit over a month in the November and December timeframe. So once that comment period was closed on the 17th, we had only received 1 public comment on that page. And actually that public comment wasn't directly related to the PURPA topic. It was actually related to a rate issue. We were able to tell that there was public activity on that page. People were clicking on the links. People were either looking at or at least downloading the attached reports, so that we know the public was engaging and seeing this information, but we did not receive any public comments related to this issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And let's go to the last slide. Just a reminder, in the determination, the third part of the PURPA compliance under this matter, the board will need to make a determination. So at the Thursday board meeting, the board will be asked to make a decision on the two matters, the changes related to PURPA. And again, we are requesting that the board take no action and not adopt these specific regulations. Are there any questions or concerns that I could address with these next steps?
Yes.
I guess just general comments. On the first one related to DR, I reiterate my strong support for the AMI being a huge value there, and I'm glad to hear that you indicated that as well as a big step forward in what we can do in that area to support our customer-owned generation and accelerate DR across the service territory. So thanks very much for that recognition. Glad to see that moving ahead. Related to EVs, do we have an EV charger deployment plan currently in place across the service territory, or are we collaborating? I know that there were several studies going on, and I know that the state has the NEVI plan in process, but do we have something internally for our own service territory right now?
I don't know that I can specifically answer that for you. I know that when I have interacted with the staff working on EV deployment, they are studying that, looking at that. And there are a few things that are going on in the legislature. So we're trying to keep track of that to see how that shakes out. I guess I would invite others.
Well, that's where we're engaged with the legislature. We're engaged with at the NPA level with other utilities to make sure that we're all coordinating and that we're all different utilities have different strategies. For us, it's very, very clear, very important for us to make sure that we're providing enough feedback to the legislature to allow a rapid deployment of vehicle chargers without necessarily us being the ones owning and operating them. But how do we allow a healthy private investment into these with, of course, the issue here is all of the details, the right cost allocation, people paying for the right demand charge, volumetric charge, et cetera. That's where we get a little bit crossed sometimes in translation, but we're certainly, I think it's premature for us to say, or it would be incorrect for us to say we have a very strong strategy of of electric vehicle charging stations at this point. I think it's important for us to get the state regulations in place and then know what we're
well, I hope that we do make sure we have a robust plan there. Currently, EV charging is mostly at home, and that works great for single-family homes with garages. But I think there's a serious environmental and economic equity and justice consideration for people who do not own their homes, who do not have garages, to have access to chargers. And so a private or market-driven strategy on EV deployments, I think it's very unlikely there will be profitable models for EV charging deployment in low-income areas where homes do not have garages. And I think that it's going to be really important for us to take a leading role in making sure that everybody does still have access, not just allowing, for example, wherever it's profitable to put in a charger, go ahead and put one in, because there are going to be places where that individual charger is unlikely to be profitable, but we need a network of accessible chargers to everyone so that they can have access to cleaner, more efficient, safer, healthier transportation in our community. And so I'm glad to hear that there are plans at the legislature. I just want to make sure that we are also internally aligning our EV strategy with other objectives for the organization to make sure that everybody does have access. Because right now we did list the deployment of chargers and 11 and about 110 across the service territory, but That number is relatively low per capita compared to other Midwest, mid-sized cities. I do think we have work to do in this area. And so I want to make sure that we are planning for this internally. If we are not going to adopt the purpose standards, that we are making sure to have an internal, robust EV charging deployment strategy that has environmental and economic justice considerations squarely at the center of where we choose to see deployments, because they will not be addressed by the market, and we need to be aware of that proactively before we begin allowing chargers to only be deployed where they are profitable. There are going to be places where they are probably not individually profitable, but we need to still make sure that that is available. So I'm looking forward to seeing how our planning works with NPA and with others, with the legislature and with federal programs. But I appreciate us being heads up about that potential stumbling block on the EV deployment path in the future. Thanks.
I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Comments or questions? Seeing none. That concludes the finance portion of the meeting. I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thanks very much. So we are a few minutes behind on the agenda, and we have lunch that is available. Director Howard, do you want to move forward right now? The food is available and warm, and if you'd like to have food when it's warm, I guess what I'm suggesting is, how do you feel about
No pressure.
Right.
have food now and then come back, and you can go right after lunch, but
Like that.
and feel free to tell people this is my fault if.
Or we could all eat cold food. I mean, so.
Right, yeah.
Fruit or you can be nice.
I think we're comfortable going right after.
Okay, great, glad to hear it. Then let's plan for the lunch break right now. And 40 minutes, so 12:15, we'll be back. Thanks very much. Welcome back, everyone. The next committee on the agenda is the Customer and Public Engagement Committee. Director Howard.
The Customer and Public Engagement Committee met on December 4th, 2023. We covered early feedback on the COP. We covered our year-end update on customer payment trends, our builder and developer update, and our government relations update. Just know in January, we'll have a more in-depth government relations update. For today, we wanted to make sure that the entire board was aware of and developers in that process. But before we get into that, I wanted to make sure that Lisa and Tim, if you had any additional comments on the customer feedback on the COP and how we're handling that. I know we talked about it under the Finance Committee, but if you have anything that you'd like to add at this point.
Yeah, I'll just add that the team did a really nice job over the last several weeks and months to ensure that there was awareness out there. So if people needed to give feedback, that they could. Now the work really starts after the vote in regards to communications to the customers and what impact that could possibly have on them. And I know Tim and the team are going to do a great job in terms of energy efficiency and helping. Tim?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Director Howard. I just had a couple of comments that we know from experience that we do a really good job of communicating. We work hard to communicate well, and still it's sometimes difficult for that message and that awareness to break through until people see a change on their bill. So our team knows that. They've done this for a long time, so they're anticipating questions that might be spurred as bills start to come out that carry the increase, however modest or impactful that might be. So we know that we're just really at the start of the communication. As much as we've worked on that, more will come as folks actually become aware of it if they're not already. So we'll be focused and really what the team will do, it'll be a heightened opportunity to do what they do every day, which is look for opportunities to help customers save money, for those customers that are having a difficult time paying the bill and affording their bill, to connect them with agencies, either programs we have ourselves, other agencies that help administer programs that might be available to them. Our teams are really, really creative in terms of making those connections for customers. So we know that that part of the work will come.
All right. Are there any other questions that the board has about customer engagement relative to the COP and the rate changes? Perfect. Okay, so then we're going to move on, Tim, to you for a builder and developer update.
Right.
Thank you, Director Howard. My name is Tim McRavy. I'm Vice President of Customer Service. I'm just going to share a couple of updates to kick off our conversation around an update to the board and to the public around our underground development process improvement. So certainly we have been engaged with the builder developer community around underground developments for decades, right? It's a part and parcel of what we do. Yet we'd also acknowledge that over the last few years, a different set of conditions have emerged that have called out the need for some more intense engagement. So in no particular order, it's been the pace and volume of development in our service territory. That's been one factor that's greatly accelerated and increased. It's been the combination of that with supply chain challenges, labor challenges, cost challenges, inflationary pressures, et cetera. All of those have conspired to create a need and an opportunity to engage more deeply. So we've been doing that for the past 12 to 18 months with a wide variety of stakeholders in this community. What you'll hear is that there are a number of concerns that are common across the different stakeholders, and there are some that are unique as well. So what we're finding as we design solutions is that those solutions have to create balance across a variety of stakeholders. And frankly, we have to introduce an element of balance as well. We have a unique perspective in that the solutions we're working for in this area, we're striving for safety of our teams and the public in doing that work. We're solving for the maintainability of the solutions and the systems themselves, and I'll say the restorability of the systems themselves and the connections. So what you'll hear today is a very high level update, certainly not as detailed as the process specific and project specific discussions we're having with the respective builders and developers. And frankly, those discussions go on all day, every day. The work also will represent, it'll be presented by Wendell, one of my partners, but it represents the work across the district of utility operations and in the district. So I'll introduce Wendell Young. He's the Director of Customer Service for our government and infrastructure area. He and his team, working with Troy's team in utility operations, have been front and center, and he'll share today's update with you. Wendell?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. As Tim mentioned, I'm Wendell Young. I'm the Director of Customer Service and Government Infrastructure. Hopefully today, this will be an informative opportunity for you to see some of the areas that we've been focusing on and some of the feedback we've received from the development community. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. As Tim mentioned, we're experiencing exponential growth in the service territory, particularly in this development space. It's both suburban sprawl and also some infill redevelopment projects that are happening as well. And because of that, you're starting to see different levels of complexity of projects across the territory. In that there's a shift from traditional residential only or commercial only developments to this mixed use environment where you might see a combination of residential apartments, commercial buildings, all in one development project itself. Because of the pace, we've seen about 3 times the number of residential lot development over the last about half a decade or so. And because of the pace, we understand that developers are a little bit frustrated about, how quickly can we turn development projects into energized services and lots across the district. In order for them to work fast, they're also designing and building at the same time. And that introduces an opportunity for continuous redesign, opportunity for missed equipment or infrastructure from original plans. And so that also kind of complicates some of those processes and execution in the field. But we've tried to capture the voice of customers across the district through various number of channels, and I'll touch on that here shortly. One of the things we found is that we're getting widespread feedback. That's great, but it's oftentimes very inconsistent. And what works for one developer or one project may not necessarily be a solution that works for the others. And as Tim mentioned, the key thing we want to do is introduce changes that both supports the development, pace, the size, the complexity, but also balances that with our ability to maintain and operate a system for the duration of the life cycle of the community. Slide, please. Like in many areas, we seek out the voice of the customer very intentionally. This is just a sample of conversations we've had. We've conducted surveys, we've had in-person meetings, we've looked at industry research, we've had case studies from other growing metropolitan areas that have helped inform some of the decisions we're making. We've met with various representative groups like Metro Omaha Builders Association, Build Omaha, Welcome Home, and we've hosted a number of in-person ad hoc meetings to capture those voices. Our field operations team, we have a continuous improvement team, as Tim mentioned, where we work with our utility operations folks, our engineering and our integrated work management teams to find additional solutions. And we seek the feedback of our contractors intentionally, the people who are actually doing the work. And then most recently, we held a development process meeting with the development community out at our Elkhorn Center. We invited over 150 developers, engineering firms, and contractors to participate, where they got a chance to see some of the in-flight activities that we're working on. We got to hear from them as well on some of the challenges they're experiencing. And then in combination, we'll continue to have those types of meetings here on the foreseeable future as we continue to look for ways to improve this process. Next slide. So as we pull in the voice of the customer, we align on some very simple themes. We wanted to address those focus areas first. We wanted to clarify the process itself, have very detailed contracts that the developers execute with Oppd for their different projects. We wanted to bring that back front and center so everyone is aligned on what the process cadence looks like. So we added an infographic to help illustrate that. One of the other feedback areas that we heard from the developers was this increased pressure on costs. So, and there's some reasons why that contributes to some of their costs of the projects. I'll get into that a little bit, but that should be clarified through the process clarification infographic you see here. So just looking at the infographic very briefly, one things we wanted to make sure we did is highlight the key milestones along the process, meaning when does their platting start, when does grading begin, when are contracts required for submittal, more importantly, when are payments due and when are we moving in for construction. So we highlighted all of those things in the infographic. Also wanted to share with them that our requirement very clearly is not require payments until our pre-construction meeting. And oftentimes we found through our conversations with developers, they're making these payments very early in the process when they submit contracts. These projects typically are 18 to 24 months in duration from the moment they submit platting drawings with the areas of jurisdiction, and then get into grading roads, water, gas, and other utilities. By the time we get there, it could be 18 months down the road. So we wanted to make sure that we clarified that part of the process for our development. The other thing, we're experiencing supply challenges just like, all other parts of the development community and the industry in general. Our specific challenges in transformer inventory. Our integrated work management team has worked very closely with our supply chain folks. We've developed a transformer control tower for all of our transformers to ensure that we're allocating transformers and installing them in the areas that need service most. It's been very successful to this date. We have not delayed a project due to an unavailable transformer, and we'll continue that process for the foreseeable future until we're beyond the supply chain challenge. An area that we also focused on was our communication in-flight projects and how are we engaging with the various developers and their engineering firms on the status of work. We've developed a new scheduling project management tool you'll see here at the bottom, where it allows developers to interact with utility coordination teams to status out their projects over the life cycle of the process you see above. The second iteration of this will allow them to also submit contract documents, pictures, drawings, that helps inform us of the status of their project. And it also signals to us when we should bring in our engineering design teams that execute the next phase of projects, when we should have construction meetings before we actually move in for work. This has been a very successful tool, and I'm really excited to see the next iteration here in first quarter. And then acknowledging that there are resource challenges that go beyond equipment, and they are actually, you heard Mikkel mention earlier about the human capital challenges. We continue to add engineering resources both internally and partner with external engineering firms to supplement our own current engineering staff. And we leverage contract resources as well to make the construction process smoother, particularly for civil installations, cable installs, and to some level, certain levels of electric cable terminations. And then the last key focus area we wanted to lean in on was standardization of design. We wanted to have a consistent process that all builders understood, that the design requirements were very clear and didn't have a lot of variability, allows for minimization of rework, confusion about constructability, site readiness challenges. And so one of the things that we're doing here is we're introducing and transitioning to front lot service on design installations. That allows for the project to have smaller lot size spacing. It minimizes the risk of having inconstructability problems due to grades or drainage, outlots, roads, all these other challenges. And it gives the homeowner ultimately the ability to construct any type of backyard service installations, pools, fences, gardens, all those different things without interruption or disruption from us on our service. This is one of those areas too that really is helps us with overall general safety of crews. We work in an area that has sufficient grade, and we can utilize equipment more efficiently across the development projects. So these things were kind of resonated through our stakeholder feedback. This is our current focus area of improvements, and we'll continue to look for other opportunities to further expand this area. Next slide, please. So what's coming next in our next iteration? These are areas that we've learned a lot about. The system will continue to have stakeholder outreach. Our next builder developer meeting will have these quarterly for the foreseeable future. Our utility coordinations teams meet with the engineering firms on a quarterly basis. We'll continue to offer opportunities for the executive leadership team to participate in the ad hoc meetings. You're welcome to participate as well. And of course, they have the ability to continue to communicate you through the board contact portal. So we'll continue that process. As I mentioned earlier, our cloud-based version of the project management tool should be coming out. I want to say January, but I'll give it the first quarter of 24. That will really help in the submittals and communications across various phases of each project. We've already started the next item, which is our design coordination in the field. So we're taking 90% design drawings, and we're having pre-design meetings to catch any omissions, errors, changes in platting, any design challenges we're seeing from slope, grade, or otherwise just unconstructible condition. And then we're having a second meeting at the pre-construction phase, where we're signaling to the developer that, hey, OPPD crews are ready to move in. Please have your site ready and prepared for our crews to come in and execute the last phase of the project for you. And so we're separating these two meetings to give builders and developers an earlier signal of progress, at least from the utility side, electric utility side, where we originally had those two meetings kind of combined. A couple other ones that are really exciting is our ducted service pilot. You see a little pictorial here about what that is. But this is a process that we utilize for apartments and commercial buildings today. We traditionally have direct buried cable like this in residential lots. We believe this gives all of us a little more flexibility. So in ducted service design, the customers' engineering firms will have the opportunity to participate in the civil design layout. Their construction teams will have the ability to install the duct themselves, and which gives them better control over construction schedule and pace. And then the OPPD responsibility will be to come back in, pull cable with standard equipment that we currently have on our trucks and real trailers, and then make terminations, set transformers, pedestals, and those types of things. So I'm really excited to see this move forward in 2024. And then the last two items are just looking at the new generation or the next level of environmentally friendly street lighting by leveraging solar street lighting designs and our continuous monitoring of the introduction of electric vehicle charging in the home, both from a system planning perspective and an engineering design awareness for our system and prepare us for future modifications of our overall URD design if necessary. So as you can see, there's a lot of in-flight items that we've been working on. There are more coming around the bend, and we'll continue to explore other opportunities for further improvements in this space.
Questions for Wendell? Eric?
From the previous slide, you have some arrows. Just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, the electrical service installation happens after all the other utilities are already in place. Is that correct? It's last in the process?
That's correct.
And so from the next slide, then the ducted service pilot would allow them to do the duct work earlier in the process and shorten the amount of time that we would need to be on site and the work that we would be doing at the end, right?
Absolutely correct. And it further spreads out our construction timeline. Oftentimes in our current design model, a lot of the grading, water, gas gets installed in the summer months. We come back in the winter. And so we get a big bulk of work kind of in one pocket of the year. By having ducted services going in throughout the year, we can also then come back and cycle through cable pulling in conjunction with that activity. So this gives the developer quite a bit more flexibility on schedule, control, design elements, and ultimately speeds up our pace of construction and energization of the services.
And so that new option is per request from the development community, is that right? And I only ask because a few years ago, I did talk to someone who explicitly asked about this exact thing. And I said, I think they're looking at it. And so now this is moving into pilot phase next year, right?
I'll give you the honest answer in that, yes, we have developers who are very excited about this coming to market. And we have others that maybe are a little bit resistant. But we're hoping by running the pilot, doing more demonstration projects, getting a few engineering firms kind of out the gate early, that we can kind of settle the, the uncomfortableness of the unknown of cost or challenges or other construction challenges that ducted services may present. But we do think that this is the way of the future. And you're right, we do have some developers who are really excited about this process.
Right. And sorry, I did have one final question that from the list of things that are being installed, are we facilitating any processes, or I want to be careful with the word pilots, focused on all electric, either homes or developments broadly, to facilitate or encourage that as a way to additionally streamline the process? Because if you take one of those arrows out of the table entirely, that seems like it could dramatically simplify things. Is that something we are facilitating for people who would like to look in that direction?
You're seeing a convergence of a few activities happening all at one time, right? So one of the key elements of this for electric vehicle charging specifically, or even all electric homes, is really the impact on the circuit as a whole. If you had a whole development that's moving in that direction, what does that do to circuit capacity? What does it do to engineering design considerations? Those types of things. So between the deployment of AMI, some of the spot metering we do have today, some of the developer conversations on which areas are moving to, maybe all inclusive neighborhoods of all electrification. All of those things come together to help inform the next level of system planning and design adjustments.
Okay, yeah, glad to hear that we're looking at that. I, through some other organizational tours, I visited 3 different developments this year that independently indicated, yes, the residential units are all electric, but none of them could tell me why. And so I'm interested in what was the policy or process or cost or simplification that led them to make the decision to make the residential unit in a multi-unit building downtown or in a row of townhouses. Why did you choose to go all electric? And so I guess I'm just interested, if this is already happening independently, what can we do to facilitate that, to provide simpler process for them, as well as safer, healthier, and lower emission homes long-term? So it seems like there's something happening here, but I'm glad to hear that we are looking at it, because people keep saying, hey, we chose to do that independently, but then it wasn't because of a particular policy. So I'm just really interested in what can we do to help encourage that being a simpler, lower cost, faster choice if people want to move in that direction.
Right. So you're seeing this in row homes, townhomes, mini apartment complexes. I think Habitat has a development that they're working on that's primarily electric, maybe a supplemental portion of gas, but you're right. Programmatically, we aren't necessarily incentivizing it at the level of, trying to further drive adoption in all electric installations. We've done some of that in the past in our heat pump programs and things like that. But it's certainly something to consider going forward.
Yeah, and the logistic advantage is really all or nothing. Unless you get all the way to the end of, you don't have to install that other infrastructure, the benefits of, you only need a little bit of it. Nope, you still need the pipe, you still need the meter, you still need all the other overheads. So it really does feel like you got to get all the way to the end of it's just one utility coming to you, not two, before you get that benefit. And I'm hoping that we can facilitate people making that choice, because I think there's a lot of benefits there. So thanks very much for this process improvement. Glad to hear we're looking at all these other great things in the future.
Absolutely.
Yes, Wendell, so let me frame the question first. Somebody tell me if I'm missing something, but I don't think we have anything in any strategic directives that relates to performance in this space. How will we measure over time the advancements that we're making and how, whether or not we're succeeding? What are the key indicators that you're looking to tell us whether or not we're?
Yeah, so in the integrated work management team, and I think John's here, he could speak to this a little bit more. We're developing a developer scorecard that monitors performance across the process itself in general. We have about a 70% redesign rate right now, so that's certainly a metric we'll be looking at. We've been monitoring lots per annual installations. We're well over 3,000 residential, truly residential lots, not mixed use commercial or things like that. If the growth continues and the capacity doesn't change, are we keeping pace with the demand of the developer? We do have a satisfaction scorecard that we monitor. It's a part of a larger scorecard, but it shows up in the field service management space. I think we've talked about this before. And then there'll be some other ones that I think that'll be coming too. That'll be more along the lines of number of feet of installed cable per crew per time. Those are some other things that we'll be looking at going forward. But many factors are a part of this process, and it'll show up in a number of different teams.
Okay, so you've got a bunch of data points that you're.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And the data will get better on that over time. So Kate and her team is looking into technology for us. You've probably heard field service management, kind of talked about it a few times. As we progress in that technological state, we'll have things more at our fingertips. Some of the work that you all are doing you saw earlier, there's ways for us and the builders to dialogue back and forth in that technology. That'll give us some abilities to calculate some scores too. So we're in a decent space. In a few years, we'll have a lot more at our fingertips, but definitely on that.
Linda, how have you been to reach out to the developers in the smaller communities around the district? I know, so you talk about the metro area, but some of us who are kind of outside the metro area, there's been maybe a misunderstanding of the process. And have you been able to reach out to those other areas of the district that are not in the metro?
Yeah, so also on my team, I have a group of electric service designers that support some of our non-metro communities. So they take the lead in that space. Our utility coordinators also work in that space as well. The communication and some of the plans, you're right, are focused primarily on metro pace of construction and development. But we do have some exceptions, particularly on acreages and whatnot. We have different line extensions for projects like that. But similar process of multi-home, multi-lot developments follows the same process. The contracting terms are the same. The pace of or the order of which utilities go into those developments are also follow similar processes. But we do have some exception clauses to be able to make those modifications in those areas where we need to do that.
I'm just wondering how you're communicating this to all of the developers in the entire
Yeah.
in the entire, area it's a huge ask.
Right, right.
But also important that everyone's included, not just the ones in the metro.
So there is a development resource page on our website. Much of the documentation you see here today with actually a little more detail is posted there. We communicate meetings, quarterly meetings in that space. I think our next one will be in March at the Whites Building, UNO campus. So that's another opportunity for engagement. And then the notes from the builder developer meeting in Elkhorn were sent out to all of the 150 that were invited. So we're making the rounds as much as we can, and as those folks have questions, they can always reach out to either our electric service designers or utility coordinators. And we're more than happy to go out if you have a group that you feel would be interested in hearing an update. We have an outreach team that is present in the community, and I'm certainly willing to go out, in that regard as well.
Thank you.
Director Mulhall, if I might just add a bit to yours and to Director Moody's question, that I think Wendell touched on it at the end. The most important sort of contact is that is happening while the work's going on. And that's where the lead utility coordinators and the electric service designers are engaged. They're engaged with those folks. So, we talk about this level of contact. There's literally contact every day between that community when there are active projects. So that's I say the first line of defense. Now that we've got some of this developed. Director Moody, I wanted to go back to your question about how do we measure it. Absolutely true with the things we're developing, the additional information we'll have. All of that absolutely does ladder up to SD5, customer satisfaction. There's elements of stakeholder outreach. There's elements of economic development in there as well. And a little bit of a spoiler alert for the board. You'll recall that we use the Escalent Cogent study as our syndicated study for business satisfaction. That occurs twice a year. Literally just a couple of days ago, we got the second half results, and Oppd was #1 in the Midwest region on the Escalent customer satisfaction score for business. Now, are we to a point yet of being able to, as I would say, portray causation versus correlation between the work we're doing and those scores? We're not at the causal connection yet, but clearly some of the work that we're doing here and Wendell's counterpart, Jim Christ, on the large C&I customer work is paying off. I hope that's helpful as well.
Thank you for this. This is really interesting. The first year I was on the board, I was contacted by a developer in my subdivision who was very unhappy because Oppd wasn't responsive and slowing things down. And I also went to, I think it was the Welcome Home meeting for public officials and that. So this is great outreach. I notice in your third slide here that feedback has been widespread yet inconsistent across the community. So I'm curious, have you gotten better feedback from developers who see us as a partner instead of as a servant?
Right.
How would you describe that?
Well, we certainly look to find ways to partner, right? So we're in this together, if you will. Let me speak to the inconsistent comment. It's really the dichotomy of different forces. Do you want us to go fast, or do you want us to do things at a low cost? Do you want to have flexibility in your designs, or do you want to have standardization, right? And so one thing we've heard clearly is time is money to developers. And so speed is jumping costs, because without speed, you still experience cost pressure. And so we want to make sure that we can go faster in a safe way. But we also, to do that, we also need to be very, consistent with our processes. Some certain level of standardization is still required to do that. And we've tried to have partnerships in that conversation. Probably the thing I didn't talk a lot about is how do we partner on some of the new ideas, particularly in the ducted service. We are actively working with an external customer architectural engineering firm for the first design layouts. We've already received 2 of those back. It's been very promising, high quality, minimal errors. The next phase of that is to go build one. And so when we go and build one, that'll be the next level. And they're along for the ride. So they're helping us in the design element process. They're helping us build those the engineering specifications and instructions for the larger community. And then the constructability and the cost modeling, they'll be a part of that as well. So I look at them as partners. The day-to-day may feel like we're a bit in a servant position, but the long play is a partnership opportunity. But we understand that we're still in the customer service business and we'll execute that way as well.
Questions? No, I just have a comment that I appreciate the explanation about the growth, but also the fact that these are mixed use developments and that adds a different level of complexity. I mean, I'm on planning zoning for City of Ashland, and it changes the dynamic and it really makes it more complicated. And I appreciate that OPBD's recognizing that and trying to work out the kinks in that. So thank you. No other questions? Thank you, Wendell. Kim, do you have any closing remarks?
I do not. I take that back. I want to say thanks. I think I've said it earlier, but like so much that we talk about in all committee, it's a few slides or a short amount of time to try to cover just an immense amount of work, and not to put it on a parallel with the things we've covered, but this is no different. The work that Wendell, John Buckley, other members of Troy's team, other members of mine have been at this really intently, and I just want to have them hear me say thank you for that work and their intentionality. Thank you, Director Howard.
All right, with that, the Customer and Public Engagement Committee is complete.
Great. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Next committee up is the Systems Management and Nuclear Oversight Committee.
Here we go. Let's do it. The Systems Management and Nuclear Oversight Committee did not meet in December. I connected with Mr. Underwood, Mr. Vi, Mr. Pohl, and had a planning meeting to decide whether or not, and to kind of look at what was on the agenda, what we needed to discuss, what was time sensitive, what wasn't. And we concluded that a meeting was not necessary. A couple things did move forward, however, and as you see on today's agenda, we have several items to go through. But I want to draw your attention to a couple things, and in particular, for the public, just a heads up that in closed session today, we did receive a pretty extensive update on some of the near-term generation activities of the district. I'll summarize that by saying lots of really exceptional progress is underway in all facets of the generation additions that we're working on. So it was a really good update, a lot of great discussion, and more will be coming as things get crystallized and completed for the public. Colleagues, the other thing I'll draw your attention to is, as you know, the committee is kind of in the early stages of working on updates to Strategic Directive number 7. So you all received an email from Cliff with respect to the proposed revision timeline. And if you had a chance to even just kind of skim that, I hope that you had the same realization that I did, which is there's a pretty heavy amount of work that's necessary in order for us to get to a place where we're ready to start contemplating some of those revisions that we've been discussing. So I would respectfully ask that we give Cliff and his team some time and space to get some of that work done. He'll continue to provide updates to the committee, and we'll bring those back to the board as is necessary. But there's quite a bit of work in front of them in order for us to have what we need in order to contemplate some revisions. So just wanted to flag those two things. Again, we didn't meet in December, but those are the two things that I felt were important for everyone to know. We can now go back to the regularly scheduled program. Let's talk about our Cast to Sarpy transmission project route announcement.
All right, we have Shane Hansen here. He's our Director of Engineering for the delivery side of the business. Jake Farrell here to give an update on the progress of this project.
Awesome, thanks, Troy. Yeah, as Troy said, Shane Hansen, Director of Engineering for Energy Delivery. I was actually here with you guys in September to give an update on this project. At that time, I was the Manager of Transmission Engineering, so really working to transition to my new role from project manager to project sponsor. Perfect time, right? This is actually exciting moment for our large cross-collaborative team. Here with my colleague Jake Farrell, our manager of real property and land management, to go through this and really showcase what we've accomplished today. So first, I really want to thank the cross-collaborative team, right? So I think we try to represent that in September and every time we come. This is not an engineering, this isn't even a land management, this is a OPPD project. So from environmental stakeholder engagement, government and community relations, members of the board yourself have attended and taken part in local leader meetings and our public meetings. Our executive leadership team has been extremely engaged in attending all those meetings as well. Javier was at one of our local leader meetings and was able to field a lot of questions from the leaders themselves. So I also want to thank the local leaders, agencies that attended and were involved, and then the public itself, right? At the end of the day, this is a public involvement process. So we're trying to build this criteria and find a route that marries all of the criteria we have to try to find the least impactful route. Now, infrastructure is going to be impactful to somebody, and we take that to heart, and why we look at this with such a cross-collaborative team to really hone in on the issues in each individual specific study area to help us define them. So want to set that context, of really what we're looking at. So Aaron, if you wouldn't mind going to the first slide, please. Awesome. So again, just to level set, this is a new 345 kV, 345,000 volt transmission line between our Cass County station and our new Turtle Creek station. We've talked previously that it is going to connect to an existing line that we've built. Ultimately, it's going to a substation off 180th and Giles. Extremely important for the growing community, right? The reliability and resiliency that this will provide the district as we continue to use our system differently is extremely important. We had real case scenario of this in the fall and summer of this year when we had the extremely high temps. We had some contingency issues where we had lines out of service for construction or maintenance. Having this line was a real issue that had this been in place, we, for reliability of our customer owners, would have been in a much better position. So it continues to highlight that benefit. So next slide, please, Aaron. So I like to always start with this slide, and it's wherever I've presented this, it gets the same reaction. Our transmission planning under system transformation identified the need of this line in 2010. So they saw this changing load and also the load growth that we're experiencing in our communities as a need for this line. Unfortunately, when it moved through the SPP processes, it finally got the notice to construct in 2022. But it's something that, as we look even back with Power with Purpose, the need of this line for that reliability in our system was just extremely apparent. So we were extremely happy in 2022 to get that. And thus 2023 is this effort that we're here to roll out to you today. So we engage in our public involvement routing process through that team. And then ultimately now, after today, we're moving into the next phase. So it goes from routing to the detailed boots on the ground work, right? So the engineering activities, the environmental studies, meeting with our customer owners who are going to be impacted in this area to really better understand, not just the concerns that they had of the broader term during the routing, but what's more specific information that they have of their property, what's their future plans and future use for their properties, and how can we now move from a route to an alignment that minimizes those impacts. So ultimately, we're still looking at having this line constructed and in service by end of year 2026. And then, we like to showcase that we're not done then, right? Property restorations follow that. It's very important for us. We're going to be neighbors with all of these folks where we have power lines for generations. So we need to put their property, restore it back to as good a condition as we found it is important to my team and to Jake's team and to all of our OPPD to make sure we're good neighbors for them in the future. So ultimately, that's my piece here. Aaron, if you proceed to the next slide, I'll let Jake talk about the routing process itself.
Thank you, Shane. Good to see you all again. How are you today? So how did we get here? This is an exciting time, right? Like these are the fun things that we spend significant amounts of time and effort to get to a place where we're announcing a route. So with that, where have we been we've been through 2 rounds of local leader meetings, 2 rounds of open houses and public input. Those happened in June, July, August, and September, early October, right? So we engage with the public, we take feedback, we take that feedback, incorporate it into the stuff that we know. We're really good at engineering types of things. The public input helps us take different accounts and lenses through this stuff. If we go to the next slide. Well, how do we select a route? As I stated here, we usually break things down into 3 categories. There's 3 levels of criteria. Engineering and environmental, we're really good at. We got massive environmental teams and we're a company of engineers, right? So we've evaluated over the past 15 years since NC2, how do we look at this stuff? What is important to the public? What have we learned through those years? Incorporated into some criteria. Where we engage the public is in that social. What's happening? What's going to happen? What are the unknowns that we just can't see in our knowledge at OPPD? So we take into those considerations and we balance. None of these are more important than the others. They're just factors, right? We take the public input, we weight criteria based on what we're hearing, and each project is different and unique. One more slide here. Normally we go through 3 rounds of public open houses. This one was a little unique based on the timeframes of the in-service date, plus our unique knowledge of Sarpy and Cass County right now. We're doing a lot of work in other areas that gave us some perceived input that we're able to put in. So rather than going with a blank slate, which is just a study area, put some lines on a map. And OPPD is bound by certain statutes that require us to route lines along section, half section lines in existing buildings. That's why you see a grid, right? So a bunch of squares. Those are segments that can be connected to make one overall route. So we took this map to local leaders and we took this map to the public open houses. We had 100 comments through mapping tools. We had 163 people attend the public open houses, and then we had 82 surveys. And with that, we came back as a team, we sat down and we evaluated what we heard and balanced that with what we know, right? So, which brings us to phase 2. And in phase 2, what we do is we take that input and we take those segments and we connect them. You can see we numbered each segment. So segment 214 connects with 215 and ongoing. At this point, we took this back again to the leaders, elected officials, and the public. And we saw a reduction in the attendees. We saw a reduction in the comments. And that's pretty common as you go through these types of stuff. Rather than the entire study area being interested, it really focuses in on those who still have lines across their property. So with that, we had 27 comments through our mapping tools, 104 attendees at our public open houses, and 40 questionnaires. And you can see here, we ended up with 4 unique route alternative options in Cass County and 5 in Sarpy. So with that, we took the feedback. And if we go to the next slide, Aaron, great. This is what the team, as a collaborative effort, determined was the best overall route. And I want to emphasize that a route is center line of road and center line of section. We have not picked which side of the road or which side of that property line this will fall on. That will come in later dates when we sit down with landowners and get information about specific properties, feed that back to engineering as they're doing design. So we have determined that running from Cass County Station down Mill Road to 144th, directly north, and passing our substation, which is just northeast of Louisville, where we take a turn here. So we have a substation right here. And then crossing the river where we currently cross. Heading up to Flug Road over to 156, north to Platteview, and then into our substation at Turtle Creek. At the end of the day, this is the best overall route, balancing the criteria that we presented to the public. With that, as Shane touched on, we're here today to announce this route and then also talk about acquisition of property rights going forward. In February, we will start those conversations with landowners. We'll have kitchen table meetings with all of those 118 property owners that we're seeing that are on each side of this route alignment or route. And then we're looking at procurement in the summer of 2024 Then we'll hold a public hearing before any acquisitions of property start late 2024. Start negotiation for property rights and following that in 2025. With that, got Shane will come back up here with me and address any questions that you might have.
Okay, congratulations. That's a lot of work, right? And announcing the site is really, as you pointed out, it's a monumental achievement to get to this point. So congratulations on that, not the zero questions.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I did have one real quick. I was waiting for Director Cord, just in case you had anything about your district, but.
No, I know all the diligence that went into this and all the consideration and appreciate that. And thanks for bringing it all to light.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my question was about the submittal and timeline with SPP, very long. Appreciate, good job on getting to the end of that. Does that imply that there is some socialization of the cost of this project? And can you talk about about that?
Yeah, so since we did get that notice to construct, there will be the socialization. So 345 kV, the entirety of the project, but roughly equates to 95% of the project will be socialized over a 30-year period. So over a 30-year period, we'll get paid back from the other socialized members of SPP.
Great. Just want to make sure how that, because that seems like a very significant benefit to us for our operations from significant cost recovery from across SPP. So thank you.
The other? Thanks again.
Jake, are you talking about acquisition of land rights?
Sure.
I saw Scott point at you, that's why I wanted.
He said you might want to stay up there and explain as to why why we're requiring these now and the expected action.
Yeah, so what we're coming to you on Thursday for is an action item to allow us to use eminent domain when all other efforts have failed in the acquisition of property rights associated with the Castor-Sarpy transmission project. It's focused solely on the temporary and permanent easements that are required for the construction operations and maintenance of the transmission facilities itself. Again, negotiations will start in 2025. Prior to any negotiations, we hold a public hearing to gather input and feedback from impacted landowners, and we'll follow the state required statutes that are associated with this process. Again, it's after all efforts have failed based off of offers from an appraiser. With that, through the history of us doing these projects, it makes sense to marry these up, and we'll do this at the time that we're announce a route and focus efforts that way. Questions, concerns?
Negotiations will start in 2025.
Late 2024, early 2025. Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Usually when we go out, we start conversations with landowners. At this point, we start talking about the project. That's one of the first questions we get is, are you going to condemn? And there's a delicate way to walk through that, but at the end of the day, we do have to answer that question.
So from a logistics perspective, the last one was reporting only, the route has been finalized, but this will be an action item on the agenda on Thursday.
Yes, sir.
Want to make sure everybody's on the same page about what we're expecting.
Yep.
On Thursday, great.
This is standard process. This is the way we've been doing it for a while.
Yes, this is how we've done it for quite a while.
Okay. Any other questions, colleagues?
Yeah, I guess just to clarify mine, sorry.
No, you're fine.
The conversations and negotiations separate, like there's some face-to-face meetings that'll happen much prior to what you're calling.
So right now, that's a great clarifying question. Right now, so starting in February, right? So we're going to announce this. Things will be starting to get posted online, but we'll send letters in January, get through the holidays here, send letters to the general public. This is the route. We'll send another letter to directly impacted landowners that are on either side of this route and start conversations. And right now, they're information gathering. There's a checklist of things we're trying to figure out. Do you have wells? Do you have things that could impact the design of this line? At the at the same time that engineering is finding an optimal design. We work together and push on each other, say, don't put a pole here, let's move it here, those types of things to find that. So the conversations are happening for about a year as design's happening, feedback's going both ways. So that when we get to that public hearing, there's no secrets, right? At the end of the day, people know where this is going, why it's happening, and any concerns they've had have had a response answered to them based off of an engineering design or right-of-way issue. And then when we get to the public hearing, that's acquisition. Right now, it's just right-of-way activities or discussions. 2024, 2025 is acquisition of rights. Thank you.
Okay, good clarification. Thank you. Good. Okay,
Thanks again.
thank you, Jake. We'll move on. A bunch of action items queued up for us this month. So let's start with the spring 2024 transmission construction.
Yeah, a couple items you changed to share. Space.
Yeah, appreciate that. So that way I don't have to walk back and forth. You get to see me walk a few times.
You'll see that we ordered these and given the reason.
Great. Awesome. Again, Shane Hansen, Director of Engineering, appreciate it. As we're here to talk about is our spring 2024 transmission construction contract. So Aaron, if you would go to that board action slide, please. So, what we're asking for today is that authorization to award our spring contract. So this is our seasonal outage-based construction contract. So we try to lump as much of that transmission work that needs our external contractor to support with and meet those economies of scale and get that done in the outage windows we have available to us. So it includes a lot of reliability projects where we will be replacing structures near the ends of their usable life. Those replacements, we've got a high volume that we're including here. But we will be looking to use a more sustainable, reliable. So typically we're bringing out wood poles. This time we're doing a combination of concrete and steel. So longer duration, higher structural capacity that we're able to design to. This upcoming project will also include installing some airflow spoilers. That's a technical term, but ultimately allows us to reduce some concerns that icing causes during those icing events. Thankfully, and knock on wood, we have not experienced any of those events in this time frame. We've had warmer temperatures. Last year in 2022, late 2022, several circuits in our South Rural had icing events that actually caused some pretty widespread outages during those days. And again, a day that nobody wants to be out of power. Extreme events from the cold, extreme events from the heat. So installing these airflow spoilers, we did that intentionally to go after some of these reliability concerns as a means to hopefully solve and mitigate a lot of those conditions that show up during icing.
These aren't the first ones.
These are not
We've
the
been
first
working
ones.
on this
Yep.
pretty systematic.
Thanks for that, Jackie.
One time.
So, the one thing we do highlight is a small portion. We do have some transmission relocation projects for some developments in Omaha. Those projects are going to be reimbursable by the developer that's doing that work. The rest of that work is, reliability work that we are proceeding with as Oppd. We did receive 8 proposals for this project, which is great that we're actually continue to see interest and availability from contractors in this space coming after our work. One of those was being the technically non-responsive. Ultimately, we're here today to recommend award to High Voltage, who was evaluated as the lowest and best bid. And they've been a good partner recently on several of our transmission contracts like this we brought. They've actually been awarded the last 2 transmission projects we brought to the board. So that'd be the board action. We'd be asking for approval on Thursday. Any questions on that?
So 8 bidders is great. That's great news. This is below the engineer's estimate. That's also great. Good experience with the company, so that's great. Looks all good. Any questions, colleagues?
No question, but I'm just really pleased to see that we're not only focused on but and Troy and I have had this conversation, but yeah, it's good to see that we're keeping up with what we've already got and maintaining the assets that we have. Thank you.
Right. So it sounds like a lot, but from maybe 5 years ago, we we more than quadruple our investment and reinvestment in our distribution system. So we've seen it through reduction of outages, frequency, duration, nature. We're not done yet. We still have pockets we're working on. This is a good example of some things that we're really focused on in this particular coming year to continue on that.
You have some, Director?
Yeah, the bottom two bids very close, and there was wide range on the others. Any comments on why some of the bids might have been so much higher?
So what we typically see in this kind of space is we have a lot of contractors that just want us to know that they're in the area. So they'll throw out kind of a bid as a, hey, we still are here. And it is with the labor market as contracted as it is, you see a lot of people that are willing to throw in and make a lot of money if no one else bids. So that's usually why we see that huge variability on the back end of these bids.
Makes sense. Wasn't sure if they knew something the others didn't. What's going on?
Sometimes it depends on where they're at in the process. Will they have to go out and hire staff, or do they have existing staff? Does the timing meet when they have some openings in their schedule? All those things kind of come in.
Okay, thank you. You got the next one too? All right, let's keep going.
Perfect. Here for this one, there are a lot of numbers and letters up there. So this contract today is to procure one spare generator step-up transformer for our Cass County Unit 1 and 2. So, we've been here several times over the last few months to talk about transformers. Typically, my group in substation engineering, we procure the transformers that step down from our transmission voltage to distribution. These are specific used at our generating facilities where, our combustion turbines, specifically for this one's Unit 1 and 2, will step up to the grid. So they are interconnected at 345 kV. The need for this GSU, as it's termed, was identified as part of our ongoing sparing strategy for reliability concerns, and ultimately tied to the extremely long lead times of this sort of equipment. So Clint Zavido, our Director of Asset Management Group, did a phenomenal job putting together asset management plans to really review what these sparing strategies need to be for these long lead material. And this was an area that we saw that we had a risk that we needed to mitigate by getting this transformer on order. So similar to what we've done in other transformer contracts, we're ordering one, but the contract has the option to renew up to 4 years after that one, as the business needs show themselves, right? So, we have a ton of other GSU transformers on order that are for some future expansion projects, but making sure we've got this spare procured is going to be a huge reliability benefit as Cass County 1 and 2 continues to operate differently and becomes more important for balancing our generation across the service territory. So ultimately, we only received 2 proposals for this generator step-up unit, one of which was deemed legally not responsive. So we really only had our HD Hyundai Electric American Corporation bid to evaluate. Ultimately, we have a lot of recent experience with them. So they are procuring some of our near-term gen GSUs, as well as they provided our Turtle Creek Station GSUs. So a lot of real near-term experience and good experience with HD Hyundai. And ultimately, for the first initial spare, our engineer's estimate was 6.5 million. It's roughly 5.99 million. That will be the first GSU. And again, with that opportunity, as project needs or OPPD needs arise, to procure more in subsequent years. So that's what we have today. Any questions on the GSU?
Sorry, to be clear, this unit would work for either of the 2 existing units.
Correct. Cass County 1 and Cass County 2. Yep.
By chance, would it work for anything else in the fleet?
So this one, Cass County 1 and 2, and Scott's here and can probably help me. For what we've built in later years, we've built things a little bit bigger. So this one is rated at 262 MVA. The new ones we're buying for future Cass County expansion, things like that, are 448 MVAs. So it won't plug and play as well into the future, and you get into space and weight constraints as well. So why it's kind of limited to Cass County 1 and 2.
It could work, but it wouldn't be optimal.
Yeah, it could work, but would be very complicated.
I don't mean to get too much into that
Yeah.
sparing policy that you're talking about, but having things that are interchangeable at lots of different locations seems like a strong advantage. So
Yeah.
glad to hear that we're looking into that.
Well, and we do have that with some of our larger transformers, just not here at the generation stations. If you remember from conversations we had about near-term resourcing, as we move forward, we're gonna look for opportunities to have similarities so that we have more consistency between what we can use for a splitter. Lots of value with that. We're seeing more and more utilities, some of our other public power peers doing the same thing, trying to build things around a portfolio of very similar like assets for that reason.
Javier and I were at a conference where we heard that exact recommendation from someone else about limit the number of pieces you have, get more of them that are more standardized. So great. Glad to hear it. Thanks.
Okay, good question. Other questions, colleagues? Thank you, Shane.
Thank you. All right, for our next item, we have Scott Edom here. We discuss a couple of things associated with the generation. Scott's our director of engineering for the production side. He's our technical expert on many things.
All right, thanks Troy for the introduction. I'll continue the theme at Cass County. So this item is for Cass County Station Unit 1 and 2. Both those units contain exhaust silencers, which help dampen the noise of unit operations similar to other combustion turbines. Cass County 1 and 2 have been in service since 2003, and these silencer baffles have never been replaced and are at the end of their expected life. The baffles are subject to thermal cycling as the units are dispatched on and off, and over time, that thermal cycling can lead to degradation. This past November, recently, we just completed some inspections and confirmed that degradation exists, requiring a permanent repair. The replacement scope that we're proposing here will include a redesign, the material supply, and installation services for new exhaust stack silencer panels for both units. We do not have the original exhaust stack design documents, as the intellectual property owner has chosen to withhold those due to proprietary considerations. These panels are unique and will require detailed structural and mechanical redesign to ensure there are no adverse consequences with the operation of the units. Because of these complexities, we are requesting approval of an engineering certification to allow detailed negotiation with capable bidders that respond to a publicly available request for proposal. Does anyone have any questions?
I'll just reiterate, the district will solicit competitive proposals, so it doesn't, that's what initiates the process, and then we direct negotiate thereafter.
Correct.
Okay.
I think I'd just like to highlight Scott, the asset management team, Scott's team, asset management team is really ramped up in recent years. The inspection process at our facilities, and they're finding these things ahead of time before they're failing, getting things ready to replace during a normal outage. And I'm really proud of the effort in that particular space. Data using drones, things of that nature is making a difference in us being able to get ahead of some of this before the failure becomes a bigger issue. So really appreciate the team work. Really appreciate the effort the team is working around to make us better.
That's right. That's a great comment, Troy. Thank you.
And again, just for context, we often refer to Cass County as one of the newer stations. It's 20 years old.
Yeah.
So I appreciate what you're talking about. This needs to be replaced. Well, it's been in place for 20 years, and this is the type of reinvestments we need to make on stations.
Sure. Okay, good. Good on that one.
All right.
Thank you, Scott.
So the next topic we've discussed in several of the pre-committees, and this is for the North Omaha Station Effluent Limit Guideline Compliance System Modification. So the current operations at North Omaha Station Units 4 and 5 create two types of coal combustion residual, fly ash and bottom ash. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency effluent limit guidelines were revised. And any facilities which generate bottom ash transport water must achieve a certain level of treatment by December 31st of 2025. Units 4 and 5 at North Omaha do that. This federal deadline has been included in our National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. So this is a permit requirement to reach that level of treatment. Following the North Omaha extension, we did engage an outside engineering firm that was leveraged to review feasible solutions and recommended using an industry leader for these types of projects, UCC Environmental. This project, which will ensure compliance with the effluent limit guidelines, is only needed for North Omaha Units 4 and 5, not at Nebraska City Station Units 1 or 2, due to different system designs. So this is limited to North Omaha 4 and 5. The modifications as part of this project are planned to recycle processed water, only allowing a minimal amount of bottom ash transport water to be discharged, which will be in compliance with the regulation. Operation of the new system is required by December 2025, the end of the year in 2025, for compliance with the ELG rule, again, as per the permit requirements. So we are requesting approval of the Associated Engineers certification to allow sufficient time to negotiate with environmental equipment and services required to bring the associated systems into compliance with regulation and complete the project by the permit deadline. I will note that there will be a separate labor contract that we will bring later to the board for approval. Are there any questions?
Does this mean any new or additional waste streams from North Omaha Station compared to current operations? Not a trick question.
Does not create any new waste streams.
Glad to hear it. And then, do you have any comments about this type of investment in North Omaha Station relative to the ongoing refueling at North Omaha Station?
So with respect to the refueling, based upon the timing of December 31st, 2025, it is a required project based upon we don't have clarity of when that fuel switch is to occur. Because we have long lead components to order the designs and install, we have to start basically now, make sure that it's in service before the end of 2025. Based upon our best estimates, we wouldn't expect conversion until spring of 2026, based upon the current SPP GIA schedule. So based upon timing, we would still need to move forward with it.
Is it possible that that schedule, that we could receive clarity and that that schedule would be adjusted based on information we receive?
So if we do receive that information, we are going to specifically work with the selected contractor to put in basically commercial escape clauses so that we can stop the project, if you will, if that clarity is obtained prior to that point.
And then last point, making this investment does not alter in any way the previous decision to cease coal operations and transition to gas in North Omaha Station, correct?
It does not.
Great. Thanks for the clarification.
I'll take us down this path a little further. Have we talked to the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy and asked if this could be foregone for the last year of operation at 4 and 5?
So Mr. Bowers is getting up to speak, so I'll let him address that since he's the normal one that talks with the NDE on a regular basis. Jeremy?
Jeremy Bowers, Director of Environmental and Regulatory Affairs. Yes, we had extensive conversations with them as this rule came out. The bottom line is without a firm date, without a deadline, there's not much discretion that can be had. Now, if we did get a timeline that put us, months, months within eyesight of when that deadline would be, we will certainly re-engage them. As a federal rule, without having a date certain, it would be, tantamount to willfully breaking law to not put the system in place.
Don't we have a max date though? Isn't it December 31, 2026?
Milestone.
So if you remember, the resolution that we have does not have a date specifically for all the reasons we discussed back in the day. What we do have is an SD7 interim goal of reduction of 3.5 million metric tons of reduction in North Omaha Station. So that's what we're using as a way to hold us accountable. However, this is dependent on, one, receiving the generation interconnection results. Two, those generation interconnection results not resulting in any additional transmission that would delay the project. And three, getting the final notification from SPP to say, yes, we've studied everything. We agree with the refueling of North Omaha Station. We currently believe that all of those are in lockstep and that will happen in time for us to make the conversion in 2026. But that conversion could happen in February, could happen in June, could happen in August. And I think that's what Jeremy is talking about. We don't have that specificity. So there are a lot of conditions that need to be met before we can pinpoint to a specific date, which is the reason why we asked for that flexibility in the resolution of the North Omaha extension.
All right, so just walk me down the path of what the, if this is not met, what are the ramifications? Are we not allowed to run those units? What's?
At that point, we would be in violation. We would receive a violation and a consent decree, which would be legally binding to either have a compliance, either become compliant or shut the units down.
And a fine, I'm sure.
Certainly.
Yeah, we'd essentially be making the decision to break the law.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's a willful violation, which you're definitely going.
Yeah.
Just criminal penalty.
So we had a really good discussion about this in November at our committee meeting. Thank you, perhaps. Yeah, and I think that just the general sentiment in the room was just like, blah. But it was pretty clear that like the pathways that are in front of us, this is kind of have no choice but to go down this path, at least until we get those three conditions met, and then we might be in a
Maybe
position
we'll
to
backtrack a little bit. Got it.
At the end of the day, this is the position. We can all feel the pain of saying it's so close,
Yeah.
we have to make these investments, but at the same time, it aligns with our commitment to sustainability, to a cleaner world. This is complying with environmental regulations that yield a cleaner world. So I think it's important. Again, painful because it may or may not be needed. It may be needed just for a few months. But at the same time, what we're getting in exchange is that reliability, that resilience that ultimately was the foundation for that resolution to extend on. So I wish we had more clarity and that we could make these type of decisions with a little more clarity, but I see it as another form of insurance, making sure that we have those units available, capable to generate, and these are the investments that are necessary.
Thank you.
Good discussion. Any other questions, colleagues? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One more.
One more.
Savadell, he's our Director of Asset Management.
Yeah, had a lot of fun today. Some of the other presentations were things that our team was tied into to enhance the reliability of our units. Like Troy said, I'm Clint Zavno, the Director of Asset Management within Utility Operations. Two items to cover with you today. The first one is the replacement of a really large motor. All the 13.8 kV, 12,000. It's a big motor. It is the now spare boiler feed pump motor for Nebraska City Station Unit 2. The backstory on this is in May of this year, in operation, this motor failed. It had been in operation for about 12 years. Because we keep a spare at the station, we were able to replace that, and we haven't been at 50% capacity with that unit for several months. Sent the motor out to a repair shop for disassembly and inspection to determine what was needed. Based on the inspection findings, we issued an RFP for either repair or replacement, and we got some bids back for both, 4 bids in total. Of those 4 bids, 1 was legally non-compliant and 4 of them were technically non-compliant, usually in the specifics of the testing of the motor post repairs. So our request is for permission to reject all bids and negotiate with
probably two of the bidders that were close to see if we can get the terms in, and verify their capability. You want to go to the next page, please, Aaron? This is the motor in question. That actually is the motor in service. And then on the right side is at the repair shop with somebody inside. So very large motor. Again, we keep this spare because motors do fail, and when they do fail, we would be without capacity for several months. I guess I'll share the engineer's estimate was $600,000. The spread of the bids received for repair was between 376,000 up to 556,000. And we do intend to go after repair because of the lead time for replacement.
Was there a common reason why all four were technically done as well?
It varied between them. We were a pretty strong specification for this because we put it in service, it really needs to perform. So there's a lot of the electrical testing was where some of them were having trouble being able to demonstrate that they could meet the requirements.
So to confirm, you're in need of approval to directly negotiate.
That is a big motor.
Big motor. Okay. I don't have verification, but I know it's in the top 5 in the state.
It's either a big motor or a small man.
It's a little of both.
Okay, colleagues, any other questions? Okay, thank you. And just to review, I know that we've got 2 engineer certificates, so those are super majority, Mr. Bruckner, right? 6 votes needed. For engineer certificates, I'm reviewing the full list.
Yes.
Yeah, but not for this one. Okay. Thank you.
Oh. Still happy for the next one as well.
You doing this one?
I am doing this.
Okay, let me cue this up if I could. Reflecting back, Troy and his team had some great insight into some potential policy revisions as it relates to SD4. The Systems Management Nuclear Oversight Committee got first glance of those, I think, back in October, maybe, give or take. And had some really good questions and thoughts that was socialized to the rest of the board. Soon thereafter, it got first glimpse to the public in November. And as you recall, as you think about when we update strategic directives, so long as the board, we were generally comfortable with it at that point, sending it to public, we essentially start the clock, ask for public comment. Clock is essentially up today. We've been waiting for public comment. And so we're at a point where we can summarize what we've heard and make a decision as to whether or not it needs to go back to committee or if it's ready for vote on Thursday. All right.
Correct. And Director Moody gave most of my presentation.
Okay, sorry.
Right there. But yeah, that was the process that led us here. It's been open for public comment from November 14th through December 17th, so last Sunday. There were no comments received. So up there, you're looking at, I believe this is the old language. Forward a slide. There's the process up to the final step today where we're discussing, do we move it to a decision for a vote? Just a quick recap of the changes. Aaron, you can advance to the next slide as well. We were proposing adding SAFE, so measuring the frequency of interruptions on our system, so that adding that to the way we measure the customer experience on a first quartile basis. And then a change from measuring EAF, or the availability of our base load stations, to measuring the forced outage rate across all of our power generating stations or all of our own generation assets, and targeting mid-second quartile for that. And then the last thing is changing to a 12-month basis for both of these measurements for a little more transparency and consistency with the industry.
Another thing, Flint, that so maybe it's obvious to everybody, but we're moving to quartile benchmarking, which we previously we've been tied to the 90-minute SAIDI measurement. It didn't feel like it comported with everything else. We have quartiles for employee relations, we have quartiles for customer satisfaction, et cetera. So this is now moving to that standardization.
Yep, and we did, just to really be specific, it does say mid-second quartile for the generation target, and that is because we're gonna be measuring our fleet against basically all the generation units out there. So, you know, that top quartile will be composed of everybody's best units, not necessarily, you know, everybody's fleet of units. So just want to make sure I'm being clear on that since we're talking quartiles.
So we want strong reliability, but we don't want gold plate. And that's what that really, it's different. You're not comparing utility to utility, but comparing ours because it's the best of the best.
That's it. There's a lot of red. The other changes was moving some of the language, the glossary, and just structural changes to the document. So we have.
Great, let's hit the next slide, Aaron. I think that's the decision point slide. There it is. Option one, we vote on this on Thursday, or option two, take it back to the committee. I think this is a pretty clear take it to vote, but I'll pause just in case anyone disagrees. Okay, this will be on the agenda on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you.
For Williams, the Systems Committee rests.
Great. Glad to hear it. Thanks very much. So that's all the committees. We do have other business. First to discuss there is the confirmation of the board meeting agenda for Thursday. As usual, we have all of the items listed under the consent agenda. Does anyone have any items they would like to remove from the consent agenda and move to the discussion agenda?
I think we should have the corporate operating plan.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Discussing it. Yeah.
Any other items that we'd like additional discussion, opportunity for discussion? We're doing good? Okay.
I didn't catch what she said.
Corporate operating. Okay. Sounds like we're in good shape on the agenda then.
Item 17, Aaron.
Next, we've got the board work plan. Okay, yeah, can't read that on the screen, but that's okay. There are updates to varying things that are ongoing here. Do any of the committees have anything they want to report about the board work plan that has not been discussed? Anything that they would like to update the other committees about for upcoming work? I think we've had email updates between committee members and from chairs to others. So I think we're all on the same page about what we're expecting moving forward. And last check there. Scott, do you have any updates to the work plan overall that you want to share with us?
Thank you for asking. No, nothing that's not been covered already.
Great. Okay. With that, I think that ends the open session portion of our agenda. We do intend to return into closed session. Yeah. So 1 second. Yeah, Director Wagner, go ahead.
Okay. I move that the board go into closed session at this time, 1:45 PM, to discuss one topic, the Enterprise Risk Management Quarterly Update. A closed session is necessary for the protection of the public interest because the discussion involves matters that are confidential and protected by the attorney-client privilege and the attorney work product doctrine, and involve the discussion of security for district property and utility infrastructure information. I require a second.
Second.
Director Wagner,
Yes.
Director Kavanaugh, Director Cord,
Yes.
Director Howard.
Yes.
Director Moha.
Yes.
Director Moody.
Yes.
Director Spurgeon.
Yes.
Williams.
Yes. Okay, the motion to go into closed session has passed. The closed session will be limited discussion regarding one topic, Enterprise Risk Management Quarterly Update. No votes or other action will be taken.
Okay.
Screen, great. A motion and a second is required to reconvene in open session.
Director Wagner. Director Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Director Cord,
Yes.
Director Howard. Yes. Director Moha.
Yes.
Director Moody.
Yes.
Director Spurgeon.
Yes.
Director Williams.
Yes. The motion to come out of closed session at 2:24 PM is carried. The closed session was limited to discussion regarding one topic, Enterprise Risk Management Quarterly Update. And that is the end of the agenda. So we are completed for today. Thursday.
Thank you.